Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO politics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the first part thereof, the 8th of June 2025. First part for today, and I'm doing it live because, quite frankly, I've just been out all day, too much sunshine, too much fresh air. One of my boys had a football tournament this morning, and then I had a multiple sclerosis Hampshire get together where I've just signed up to going on a catamaran in the Solent for actually very cheap, £20, 20 quid for a day out in the Solent with a bunch of people with MS floating around, helming a catamaran. So that'd be nice sometime in June. So it's been a very active day for me. Too much fresh air, quite exhausted now, really thirsty as well. So we are going to go together. We're going to romp through the meadows of destruction. That's a very odd metaphor. Together, whereby there is an awful lot to report to you. And considering there is so much, I thought I'd do it live because otherwise it just becomes a prohibitively long standalone video. And lives generally do they are suited to being a bit longer. So an awful lot, as I say, to go through. Let's get started. Thank you all for being here. Those of you who are, I really, really appreciate it. We are going to look at the Ukrainian general staff figures, obviously, first of all. And we have 1,120 personnel lost, which is pretty standard for this last week or so. 7 tanks, 11 troop carrying airfies, and 42 artillery systems. Now, those categories of tanks and troop carrying airfies, that fits into. I did a breaking news update yesterday on the developing information, and I have more information to share with you about it. But I did a breaking news update on the train that could be the Spiderweb 2.0 mission and there are claims that drones were coming out the hopper openings at the hatches at the top and then blowing up 13 tanks and 100 bits of kit in total, there or thereabouts. And I said it may or may not be true. I don't know yet, but the figures from the general staff definitely indicated that that's what took place. And they've now popped down again today to what we'd seen. So you have less than the daily average tanks, AFVs, and lower vehicles and fuel tanks over the preceding sort of 3, 4, 5 days. And then yesterday, a massive spike on all of those categories and a claim that a train load of equipment was blown up. And then some, and that was coming from the official account from the southern district of Ukraine. So it's going to be somewhere in the Zaporizhia area or nearby. And all the dots were kind of joining, but there was no visual evidence yesterday. No claims outside of a Russian claim to say which is possibly indicative of it happening, and then a few sort of Ukrainian sources adding some meat to the bone. But still, we've heard nothing in terms of visual evidence. And this is potentially a huge loss to the Russians. We're going to go through it in the next section, not this section, because we don't have any new information about that. But the figures have then dropped back down to what we'd expect. So there definitely was a spike yesterday. Ukrainian general staff indicate there was a spike. They are claiming there was a spike in those categories. The claim is out there. No visually confirmed evidence of this, but it still looks like it did happen. Now, we have less than a daily average tanks and troop carrying airfields. We have 42 artillery systems with about twice a daily average, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. We have an aircraft on there. That's going to be the Su-35 that was shot down yesterday in Kursk. We have more information on that and actually a more accurate geolocation. It wasn't as far back in the region as we thought, which makes a lot more sense, by the way. 146 vehicles and fuel tanks. Yes, JR, he's just messaged me on the side. You're doing a sneaky live. Yeah, I didn't even announce it on my back end, just last minute. So if you guys are complaining you don't have any notifications, it's because I've literally just decided to do this. Okay, so 1 aircraft added to that, which is good news. 146 vehicles and fuel tanks, which is fairly decent, and 3 pieces of special equipment. I do wonder about special equipment, whether that includes things like Iskanda launchers. Now we'll get onto that in this next section. So, but for this section, those are the figures from the Ukrainian General Staff. JR, if you're bored and want to come on the back end to have a look at questions and whatnot, you're always welcome, my good man. I will send you an invite, but there you go. It is Saturday. You might be up to nothing. You might be up to something. Right. Okay. Ukrainian forces have captured a former commander of the Russian Caspian flotilla minesweeper. Captain Lieutenant Mamayev was taken prisoner in Tetkino, where Ukrainian troops advanced and seized Russian positions. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tetkino is in the middle of the land. It's in Russia. It's a village just across the border from Ukraine in Kursk, and it's not a minesweeper in the middle of the ocean. So what is going on there? So this could be a reflection of the desperation for the Russians in terms of desperately needing troops. We've heard they've been taking some coast guards on board. We've heard that the Russian Kuznetsov aircraft carrier that has been stuck being fixed. They only have one aircraft carrier, and it is not in operation at the moment, and has been stuck in port for bleeding ages, and is looking like it's going to be stuck in port for even longer. But actually, kind of unsurprising, I guess, the Russians have said, well, what's the point of having these sailors sitting around twiddling their thumbs while the aircraft carrier is still in dry dock or whatever? So they've pulled some of those sailors into the armed forces, the land forces, and they keep doing this in different contexts. So here's another example of the desperation, I think, for the Russians on the front line. Once a commander of a Caspian minesweeper in 2013, he now serves as a platoon commander. So it could be a reflection of what's going on now. Oh no, that's in the wrong section. That should be there. We'll come to that later. Okay, now we have some Oryx loss lists. We have the Russian equipment losses and the Ukrainian equipment losses, fairly similar. 25 Russian losses. It does include a Zhitel system, which is a high-value electronic warfare system. It includes another 295 MS strategic bomber, so that's a bit more evidence of something taken out in Operation Spiderweb. We've got the Su-35S multi-role aircraft that we have new imagery of as well. There's a 1L261, which is for the Zupart counter-battery radar complex. That is high value. We've got an OSA, which is a shortish range air defense system. So these are really high value pieces of kit. So although there aren't too many more than the Ukrainians, what the Russians have lost in that list is incredibly valuable. The Ukrainians here having 17 losses, but essentially, we've got a couple of Bogdanas. You're going to see more and more of those on the loss lists, because they are producing more and more to the point where they are going to be the mainstay of the Ukrainian artillery forces there. We've got a CV-90 abandoned there. UK provided Husky. Most of these are mobility vehicles for the Ukrainians in the middle there. A few tanks at the top, and a TRML 4D multifunction radars. So that is a high-value bit of kit. The Germans have provided quite a few of them, to be fair. Now, there was a claim that this might well have been a decoy, and not everyone is 100% sure that that is indeed the radar system that is claimed there. But I guess Oryx is fairly happy with adding that to the loss list for the Ukrainians. Okay, so sorry, I'm doing something else that one of my boys has asked me to do. Multitasking. This is modern life, eh? Okay. I've got messages flying around all over the place trying to do 58 things at once. Liquidated group of Russian invaders. Their motorcyclists were destroyed by the Ukrainian 71st Jaeger Brigade. We have a lot of motorcycles there, just to show you that, yes, they are still using motorcycles. Of course they are. This is a mainstay of their offensive operations. Now, I reported the other day that Andrew Perpetua was talking about how things are changing. There's an asymmetry in certain areas of the war, particularly in drones, where one side gets an advantage. Russians had the advantage in fiber optic drones before the Ukrainians have piled in loads of effort. There probably still is an asymmetry there. But the Ukrainians seem at the moment to have an advantage with interceptor drones. They've developed them ahead of the Russians. Interceptor drones are drones used to intercept other drones, such as, in this case, things like the Lancet drone, the Russian, or a reconnaissance drone. This is a case of an Orlan 10 being taken out. So these drones, these reconnaissance drones, the Russians hope they're going to be flying deep into Ukrainian territory, hundreds of kilometers back. But actually, the Ukrainians are taking some of these drones out before they get even remotely close to the Russian border. So they're being sent, and these interceptor drones are getting greater and greater ranges. Here's the asymmetry, the advantage that the Ukrainians have here. So Ukrainian FPV interceptor drone took out an Orlan 10 drone over Kursk at a distance of 33 kilometers behind the front line near Tolpino. And this is Magyar's Birds responsible for this by all accounts. Now, to be 33 kilometers behind the front line means you're going to be sending that drone up, I don't know, maybe 43 kilometers from where it is striking this reconnaissance drone. So you've got an interceptor drone with a really significant range. And remember, it's got to go quite far up as well. And taking out these reconnaissance drones well before they even get to the Russian border, Ukrainian border. Quite incredible. And that's exactly what the Ukrainians need. Okay, operators of the 14th Separate Regiment use the Switchblade 600. These are US provided kamikaze drones that came in the form of the Switchblade 300 and Switchblade 600. 300 was more like a hand grenade for personnel, had a smaller range. You basically, and it's easier to carry. The Switchblade 600 is heavier, but it still fits, I think, in a backpack. It works out as a kind of little tripod mortar type thing. You set up the little mortar and then fire off the drone, and then obviously you control it to where it goes. Now, it seems using Switchblade 600s quite effectively now. There's a bit of controversy over the Switchblades at the early part of the war. They're heralded as being, this is the future. Look at what the Americans can provide. It's all awesome. And then actually they're a bit of a dud. It was certainly the Switchblade 300s, because you couldn't use them against armored vehicles at all. They're just like hand grenades. But the 600s seem to have come into their own of late. I don't know if they've been adapted at all throughout the war. Then lots more imagery coming out of guided glide bombs, and particularly the Ukrainians using these to great effect here, blowing up something quite significantly. It's a MiG-29 hammering a Russian base with ammunition. Judging by the explosion pattern, something like solid rocket fuel was also stored there. So good news for the Ukrainians in that respect. But the Russian guided glide bombs are flattening entire apartment blocks 50 kilometers away from where they are released. Ukraine learned to jam them. And then the Russians' response was to, and I have reported this previously, to develop the bombs to fly twice as far. Now, 180 bombs daily are striking from 95 plus kilometers beyond Ukrainian air defenses. That is a real issue. So the Russians are able to release these guided glide bombs quite a long distance behind the front lines and behind even the border here, and that makes defending against them really very difficult, because they have jammed them to some degree, but these bombs are still going to fall. Like you can stop them from being so precise, but they're still going to hammer into the front line somewhere. But anyway, this is a problem that Ukrainians are going to have to deal with. How do they stop the Russian aviation from releasing these bombs from 95 kilometers away? Of course, you're going to be talking about striking airfields before the planes even take off. Right, here's a captured Ukrainian Leopard 2A6 tank in Darino in the Kursk region. So that is a shame that the Russians got their hands on one of the better Ukrainian tanks there, the Western provided Leopard 2A6 German tank. And then we have, this is Russia on fire, but it might not be. So what has been happening, and we're going to go onto this in the strike section, what has been happening in the last few days has been the Ukrainians have been, there'll be so many fires. We're just about to look at a whole bunch of footage of a swathe of things, a whole suite of things in Russia burning. There's some serious burning going on. Ukraine have been throwing in missiles and drones to Russia on a daily as well as nightly basis. Now, we've heard a lot about the Russian attacks on Ukraine, but Ukraine have been giving as good as they get to some degree, I think. But we just don't always find out what they have hit. And that could indicate that they may not have as much success in hitting the targets they want to, or the operational security is good, whatever. I keep talking about this, but every day there are huge numbers of Ukrainian munitions thrown at the Russians. Even today, the Ukrainians are supposedly throwing Neptune missiles at Crimea, and there are all sorts of alerts going on throughout Russia. It is pretty relentless. We're going to focus on that in not this next section, but the one after. This next section, I'm going to go on to stuff that's happened over the last week where more information is coming out. So we're going to, Operation Spiderweb, Crimea Bridge, Iskanda missiles, launches getting blown up, Su-35 getting shot down, all those kinds of things where more and more information emerges as each day passes. But we're going to go to that Spiderweb 2.0 locomotive explosion or target, the locomotive being targeted by all those drones that came out, the grain hoppers. As I reported yesterday, there are some more details on this, and there is some confirmatory evidence in the form of firms data, even if we don't have any visual evidence. Okay, let's remind ourselves what happened. So Visioner here reporting that an absolute madness, quote, another shocking failure by our special services. There is no point in staying silent anymore. The enemy blew up a locomotive, so this is a Russian claiming this, that was transporting tanks, dozens of armored vehicles and military transport equipment. At one point during movement, hatches on grain transport wagons opened and drones flew out. These drones attacked the military equipment placed on the platform cars. It's unclear who came up with the idea of sending military hardware along with grain wagons. It's also unknown how Ukraine's security service managed to hide the drones there. So remember, this is the same thing I read out to you yesterday. I'm just reminding you. The first strike hit the locomotive, causing the train to lose speed and eventually stop. As a result, the enemy destroyed most of the equipment without resistance. Internally, the operation is being called Spiderweb 2.0. Someone must be held accountable for this, wrote an enraged Russian military correspondent. On the map, you can see a massive fire currently captured. So this was the 7th of June at 8:07 p.m. So this was written yesterday. So I don't know when this was supposed to be on fire. On the map, you can see a massive fire currently captured by satellites on the location of the strike on the echelon. But I actually don't know exactly where that is, and I haven't done a geolocation of that. I haven't had time. But it'd be interesting if anyone has any details of that front. That's a huge, huge fire, right? Is that a railway line? This looks like, I don't know if that could be a railway line going up there. Whether this is in railway sidings or something, but that fire is really extensive, but I don't know what it tells us, and I don't know if it really confirms what is being claimed here. But nonetheless, okay, so that's given us some detail. Now, Intel Schizo, as a source, says Operation Perpetua, so that Spiderweb, continues. In yet another stunning failure by Russian special services, Ukrainian forces allegedly executed a highly effective precision strike on a Russian military train. The attack resulted in destruction of roughly a regiment-sized unit worth of equipment. The attack left the entire transport operation exposed and immobilized, with no effective resistance mounted in response. According to Russian Telegram, the strike was facilitated by covert infiltration of grain hopper cars on a train. At a critical moment, hatches on the grain containers flew open and Ukrainian drones were deployed directly from within the grain hoppers. These drones proceeded to attack the lead locomotive, disabling it, causing the train to come to a complete stop, and then proceeded to attack the equipment on adjacent flat cars. The unconventional method of using disguised grain hoppers to smuggle in combat drones raises serious questions about Russian operational planning and counterintelligence capabilities, assuming, of course, it is correct. And all sorts of caveats apply. Grains of salt, blah, blah, blah. Because we want this to be true, right? But that can cloud our judgment and our evaluation of the data. Ukraine's Southern Forces Command claims Russian equipment losses, but so the Southern Forces have now come out with a set of numbers for the equipment. So 1 railway locomotive, 13 tanks, which we had heard, 7 artillery systems, 103 units of automotive and armored equipment. So there's a whole range of stuff that can come under that umbrella. 10 fuel tank cars carrying an estimated 158,000 to 172,000 gallons of fuel. So not only that, but fuel cars or possibly interspersed on the train, which is going to help that train burn down. So if you've got a fuel car, then a bunch of equipment, then a fuel car, I don't know how it was arranged, if indeed this happened, but you can imagine this being an absolute expletive show. 10 fuel tank cars is going to burn good. Russian Telegram claims the loss of a locomotive destroyed with the tanks and dozens of armored vehicles. For now, we wait for further details on the nature of the attack. I mean, the big question is, where exactly did it happen? Okay, so there is that, and hopefully it happened, and we're going to get more information. Gen Consensus says, yeah, 100 vehicles, armored vehicles looks like an exaggeration. Yeah, I don't know if it does. I mean, I would just reserve judgment completely. I mean, they've added it. It appears that they've added about that much. It appears that they've added exactly that to the general staff figures, because that's what I calculated were kind of the spike in numbers yesterday. Tanks, I think, was it 15 were claimed yesterday, so 13 fit within that. 7 artillery systems, yeah, easily. 103 armored. It shot up to something like, I don't know, was it 50 something or 30 something armored personnel vehicles, and then 166 vehicles and fuel tanks yesterday. So that's easily within what was reported by the general staff yesterday. So either all of them are lying or they're not. And it's true. Okay, let's go back to the Su-35. If you want some interesting analysis of this plane being shot down, go and check out some of the comments on my thread from the breaking news I did on this yesterday. Some really good stuff from you guys talking about what might have happened here. Now, we do have to make a corrective, and it could be that just like Ukraine, there are many villages of the same name in the same places in Russia, right? I've shown you before when I did an entire separate video on Ukraine's ridiculous preponderance of same named places. And as I was going through the map, I found live, as a pre-record, but as I was doing it, I found 3 villages in like 15 kilometers, basically 3 villages of the same name in the same place. You're like, what are you doing? How the hell does a post service work here? I mean, yeah. Anyway, I'll meet you by the post office in this place, and you're like, you could be waiting for a long time for that hot date, as actually they're in a village just 5 kilometers down there with the same name. You're like, what is going on? Anyway, I plugged the name of the village into the map in Kursk, and it came up with a village over here, but it could be a village that was actually much closer to the border. So confirmed yesterday, in Russia's Kursk region, a Russian Su-35 jet was shot down by an AIM-120 AMRAAM active radar air-to-air missile launched from an F-16 Block 20 mid-life update fighter jet. Says Visioner, again, don't know the provenance of this data, but the claim is it was an F-16 and it was using an AIM-120 AMRAAM. So you would expect that the situation that brings that about is it was fairly close, and that it might well be that the Saab AWACS style plane was being utilized. And indeed, that seems to be what most people are saying. So there's now new footage. So it's funny, yesterday, some people saying that's AI, CGI footage of that plane that was blown up when it was from above. It's like, no. Anyway, the Russians are now actually showing footage of the plane. This is from much, much closer. And you can see, interesting the way that has fallen. There's stuff that you can work out, no doubt, from that, and you can geolocate that too. So footage of yesterday's down Russian Su-35S in the Kursk region. I don't think we've got anything. No. And then the location of, yes, they shoot down of the Russian Su-35 by Ukrainian F-16. It was fairly deep into Russian territory. Now, I was reporting it way further back here, like literally off my screen, up to the top right there. And that needed some explanation. So we were coming up with theories. And of course, yeah, not of course, but it ends up that it probably wasn't shot down there, and it's actually shot down much closer here. You got Tekino, Koronevo, and that's well within range of F-16s doing that. F-16s being much further back here, but you know, this fits in, I think, a lot more plausibly with what we know. So further south of Lugov and Rilsk, this is basically Koronovo is where the Ukrainians have got to when they're fighting in Kursk. So this is right next to the salient, just slightly north of Glushkovo, basically. So really very close to the border, and that makes a lot more sense as far as I'm concerned. Now, Tendar says Russians confirmed that one Su-35S was destroyed in Kursk. According to Ukrainian sources, it was a Russian plane shot down by an F-16. It's likely that the Ukrainian F-16 fighters are already aided by the Type ASC-890 surveillance aircraft. Sweden announced the transfer of 2 of these planes of the AEW&C type back in 2024. Its radar can track targets up to 400 kilometers away. So many people are saying similar that if you factor that in, then it's likely the F-16 had an advantage over the Ukrainians, over the Russians, especially given the Russians' own AWACS planes, the A-50s. 2 of them might have been taken out recently, although it looks like those 2 A-50s were non-operational. However, there were also claims of other there were 4 air bases hit in Operation Spiderweb. And although those 2 A-50s were at one airbase, there might well have been another A-50 somewhere else that was hit. Anyway, there could have been a degradation of the A-50 fleet. But either way, the Russians, for the size of the country, do not have the AWACS coverage that they would very much like. Now, talking about Operation Spiderweb, Reuters has come out. Well, actually, a German Major General, Christian Freuding, who's someone that is heavily involved in analyzing and talking on the war, German Major General, says a Ukrainian drone attack last week, so Operation Spiderweb, likely damaged around 10%. So we've gone down from 30% to 10% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. Remember that initially there were like 14 planes added to the Ukrainian General Staff. Then they aligned themselves with the SBU and changed it to 41. Then more footage came out to suggest in the low 20s have destroyed and damaged. And now Christian Freuding seems to scale that back again even further than maybe the low 20s. But anyway, he's claiming 10% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet and hit some of the aircraft as they were being prepared for strikes on Ukraine. According to our assessment, more than a dozen aircraft were damaged, 295 and 222 strategic bombers, as well as A-50 surveillance planes. So I actually think there's evidence that it's more than that. So I think he's underselling that. Personally, I think OSINT has now shown that over 20 have been hit. In fact, it's probably worth me bringing this in now. So there is new footage that has come out of Operation Spiderweb. I did a separate video of the previous new footage that had come out. I might do that with this as well. I'm not going to show it to you now. It's 2 minutes of a drone taking off from the container where the roof had been taken back, and it follows that drone, that single drone's journey from container to the airfield. You can already see things are on fire and burning. There are things burning below, so you can imagine that this seems to show that drones had already come down. Maybe they're malfunction, maybe they've been taken out. I don't think they'd be intercepted there. There's a burning part of the field here, so I think a number of the drones might well have had some issues and fallen out of the sky and blown up. So as Anton Gerashenko says, new video here, it shows FPV flying out of the module house. I'm showing all this to you now, aren't I? Flying quite a distance and arriving in Belaya airfield, where smoke and from already hit aircraft is visible. There are no obstacles on the drone's route. But yeah, as you can see, there are burning, but once it gets there are lots of burning planes. And I don't know if this extra footage has shown any further aircraft from what was already thought to have been damaged or destroyed. You can see in the background as well, other burning things over there. That's obviously, not at this airfield. So unless there's a second part to the airfield over there, or there are fields that are burning over there where drones maybe coming from another direction had fallen, or maybe this drone has turned around and my directional appraisal is somewhat erroneous. But anyway, there you go. That's some more footage coming out of Operation Spiderweb. We'll just play this on to the end and see what the drone does. We're looking at a strategic bomber there that's possibly, going to have a bad day at the office as the drone settles down and says bye-bye. And you'd imagine that then blew up. Okay. Interesting that this, if you remember, I talked about how an Iskanda battery was hit. The claim was that 3 elements were destroyed. Well, there was a claim that 1 element was destroyed, 2 were at least damaged, but I couldn't find out what the 3rd one was because this footage only seemed to indicate 2. But that's not to say there wasn't some other launcher that's just off camera somewhere. Anyway, Zelensky himself reported in his evening address that as a result of a missile strike on Iskanda launchers on June 5th in Bryansk, all 3 launchers were destroyed. So if you said someone's saying 3 smoke trails, this one there in the middle is from a cooking off one from here. If you watch the video, so that's cooking off doing that. This one is cooking off from over there. These are the 2 main areas in that video, but Zelensky himself said that all 3 launches were destroyed. Now, I don't know if Zelensky is himself any more reliable as a source when talking about this stuff than any other source that we rely on. No reports then mentions of that strike, and I'm pretty sure it's this one and not the one that took place at the this is that one. It's not, because if you remember, there was, I think we might come on to, I don't know if we've got something about this. No. So I'm interrupting myself. There was another strike at Bryansk, I think that same day in the evening, at nighttime, where the Bryansk airport was hit and there's a massive explosion. And then the Russians admitted that 2 helicopters were destroyed there, but other people saying there was definitely something more than helicopters because the explosion was so significant. And it looked like an Iskanda launch system or Iskanda missiles were blown up there as they were readying for a nighttime attack on, no doubt, Kiev. But back to this one that happened earlier in the day, i.e. this one you're looking at. During a Ukrainian strike on the Iskanda missile system in Bryansk region on June 5th, 8 Russian servicemen were killed and 5 were wounded, according to Astra sources. The attack occurred near Martianovka village in Klintsovsky district. And actually, even more detail has come out. So as a result of the June 5th strike on a position of the Russian Iskander-M installations in the Bryansk region, a large group of Russian officers were eliminated, including Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Podozorov, commander of the 26th Missile Brigade Division, Military Unit 54006. So really, possibly high-ranking officers taken out in that strike. That would, I think, convey quite a successful evaluation of that. Now, the Kerch Bridge, though Russia claims the Kerch Bridge is open, so remember then there was the explosion or explosions. There were claims that actually there were 2 explosions that day on the Kerch Bridge, but we definitely saw one of them, which may have resulted in those support pylons being damaged underwater. We just don't know. Now, though Russia claims the Kerch Bridge is open, vehicle traffic is limited. The recent underwater attacks specifically targeted supports to the rail crossing. No trains have moved on the bridge since the strike, and the crossing will likely be closed for months, as Aidan, who is a pro-Russian source, says. I mean, probably the most pro-Russian source says, "What is your source?" And that's a valid question. I have heard several times that only the cars are operating and it's light vehicle traffic across there, which is that brings about something of a success in that strike. If you're not getting rail crossing across there, that's really what the Russians are relying on when it comes to providing materiel support for Crimea. So that actually, even if it just succeeds in stopping rail traffic, at least for some considerable time, then that will be a success for the Ukrainians. Okay, I am going to take a little swig of beer, speak to you guys, go through some super chats, and then we'll go on to what is an insane amount of footage of burning things, just burning things all over the shop. Yes. Okay. Big thanks to Rick, and thanks to you yesterday as well, Rick. Hi, Jonathan. Did I spot a new Car for Ukraine project? Yeah. Oh my goodness, I haven't even talked about this. So I was talking with JR about what should our next project be. So we're going to do something a bit different, but it's going to take a bit of time to sort that out. JR's looking into that. If that materializes at all, that'll probably be July time. So just while we're waiting for that, we have started a new Car for Ukraine project. I don't know if it's linked in the description below because I need to get hold of Benny Pie for that. And he's gone quiet for a couple of days. So I need to just get hold of Benny and make sure that the link changes. But you can go to the Car for Ukraine website, go on to, in fact, let's just do that together, shall we? So we're just going to raise one vehicle for them, Car for Ukraine. So this is the old one I have there, Eastern Pysanki. But if you go to their home, that's now over and done with. They've got a summer one on campaigns. So just put in Car for Ukraine, car for the digit for Ukraine.com, campaigns, and go to Summer Sunshine Trucks. So you can see there is a lot that's been raised already. There's a big old goal similar to our last goal, to be honest. I think there was somebody donated an absolute shed load for one of the as you can see there, History of Everything 50,000. I don't even know History of Everything. They are doing pretty well there. We are in 9th place because I haven't even gone on this page yet, and already people have helped with 125 euros. So thank you very much. Please make sure you click on the ATP Geopolitics one in order to help that campaign, and so it gets subscribed to my channel, to our team, really. And you can go and watch a video of who will receive that. Oh, there's a new pin you can get as well, the Fortress pin. I've not seen that yet. So this is all news to me. We've just kind of joined in. I don't even think unfortunately, our little badge won't be on there because we've just joined in last minute. So that's my bad for being a bit behind the curve there. So a couple of patches you can get depending on how much you donate and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. That is what is happening there. I was just going to say, oh yeah, thank you, JR. He's put up the link there in the live chat. Thank you very much, Rob, for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that, dude. Johnny Nedregard, some Norwegian love there. Thanks very much. I have indeed given you, Marie, some more information on that grain train, although still we need that visual confirmation. That'd be great. Martin, is that Ijsendon? Or anyway, Martin, thanks for all the updates and hard work every day. Let's hope the war will end soon. Yes, absolutely, 100%. More on that particular note, because Zelensky said something pretty interesting with regard to that. F Oink super sticker, thank you very much. Really appreciate you, F Oink. Thanks for being part of the team here as well. I know you're a big supporter of Greg Terry as well. JL said the location of the Su-35 could be wrong. Sukhamimus made a video of it. Yep, it's difficult. Although that new footage should be able to you should be able to geolocate that fairly easily now. So I'm fairly hopeful they'd have a decent geolocation on that. Thank you, by the way, Fedantic13. Hi, JP. Following you for a long time now. Just wanted to say that I really appreciate your efforts in relaying facts. Keep it up, mate. Thank you, because it's about all of us really. And helping out as much as possible. Okay, right. Oops, I accidentally pressed that, so that shouldn't be there. But hey ho. Right. Okay. Let's now look. Oh, Goose Sprinksney. Hi, Goose. In there with the chat. Right. Okay. we're now going to go to distance strikes, and we're going to start off with what the Russians did, but actually very little information what the Russians did last night, because it was a much smaller set of drones sent in, and most of them were shot down. Although it's just below 20%, it's still somewhat sizable percentage that got through. It's a somewhat sizable percentage of a much smaller number, so that's all right. We had 49 drones sent in, where we've had days of 400 or nights of 472. That is a considerable difference. The question is, why is that? Again, my old mantra: you would if you could, you aren't, so you can't. If you aren't sending in 472 drones, then you can't send in four. If you said to Russia last night, would you like to send 472 drones into Ukraine? They are almost certainly not going to say, oh, no, I think we'll give them a night off tonight. No, we're not too bothered tonight. Just send in 49 and then go and have some vodka. That's not going to be their rationale. They would almost certainly say, yes. So why is it that they only sent 49 in? Is it their manufacturing facilities being hit? Is it their production is maxing out? And yep, they can kind of stockpile for some fairly consistent big numbers going in, but then they run out. Is it depots are being hit? Who knows? So much stuff has been hit recently. You're not quite sure what the Ukrainians have achieved, but I have to say that is a much smaller number than you would expect, and that is going to be because they haven't succeeded in doing what they wanted. As ever, the question is why. Is Scruffy Tails in the chat there? Great to have him on board. If he is, if you want a much more consistent and better frontline update than my ones, you want to go and check out Scruffy Tails. Really good frontline updates. Okay. A P-800 Onyx anti-ship missile got through, and 2 KH-5969 cruiser missiles got through. So 3 missiles got through, but no information or no battle damage assessment, no knowledge of what was hit last night, if anything. There was only 9 drones out of 49 got through. So good news there. Now, Euromind Impress pretty much reflecting exactly what I was just saying. So after the mass explosive drone assaults, Russia launches just 49 drones and Ukraine shoots down 40 of them. Moscow probably stockpiles explosive drones for a more massive attack. So the other theory is this, and actually this is going to make me go to the end of what I was going to say. Oh no, I think it's next. So, okay, it is next. So the other theory is, okay, we've had depots could be hit, manufacturing facilities could be hit, production maxed out, whatever, and or they are stockpiling for a really proper big attack. So slight night off to a degree because they haven't finished doing their retribution for Spiderweb, Operation Spiderweb, and the Kerch Bridge. So next, the reports here actually is coming from I don't know. It's not Reuters. Anyway, Russia preparing massive new strike on Ukraine in the coming days. The Kremlin's full response to Ukraine's Spider operation is, it is Reuters, is still ahead. Sad that I can look at the font and know what it is. Moscow is planning a massive, brutal, and unrelenting attack. So 49 drones sent last night, as much as that's good news, it's also foreshadowing potentially a massive attack to come. Notably, officials say Russia is preparing an asymmetrical strike, not against military targets, but symbolic and vulnerable ones. That would be, I imagine, if they hit some cultural landmarks like Statue of the Motherland, some of those really iconic places and things. That would be an absolute, just be even more war crimes, no doubt, from Russia. So I wonder if that is what we can expect in the near distant future. Now, Russia started calling its terrorist attacks on Ukrainian cities a response to Ukraine's special operation targeting strategic bombers, says Anton Gerashenko. These so-called responses include strikes on residential buildings in Kharkiv, Kyiv, Lutsk, Priluki, and other cities. Russia continues to drop guided glide bombs on Kherson. It's carried out the most intense attacks on residential areas in Kharkiv since 2022. And over the past 24 hours alone, 6 civilians were killed and 44 wounded in Kharkiv and the surrounding region. Russian forces also continue targeting civilians in the center of Sumy. Russia is killing Ukrainians simply because it can. Its goal is to wipe Ukraine off the map. Ukraine is not provoking, it is defending itself. These attacks aim to spread panic, break civilian morale, and destabilize the rear. Through terror, Russia seeks to impose ultimatums on Ukraine and intimidate both Ukrainians and Europeans. Meanwhile, Russia deceives the US with false talk of peace. Putin lies, as he always does. He must be forced into the negotiating table. He only understands strength. So that is Anton Gerashenko's opinions. I'm just going to show you. This is not a video of last night. This is 2 nights, maybe even 3 nights ago in Kiev, when Kiev was hit. But it's an absolutely incredible bit of footage. And it just, I mean, the terror. Imagine being the person filming this. Absolutely incredible, just outside your window. And I'm just trying to work out what it is that they've hit down there. This is pretty much in the middle of the city of Kiev, give or take. I mean, Kiev's a big city, right? So, when you say in the middle, what do you really mean? But, it's definitely some industrial commercial enterprises around there. But this is from an apartment block, and it is right next to the apartment block. Quite incredible footage. And then we have Ukraine attacking. Okay, so that's all we have from what the Russians did. In fact, no footage from last night that I have anyway. And then we have what the Ukrainians did. So Ukraine attacking Russian territory with over 400 drones in 4 different directions, a massive attack. So this was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. And that was yesterday evening. This is a drone bomber image showing that a lot of activity a lot of munitions thrown into Bryansk and Kursk, but then up into Tula and Ryazan and towards actually Moscow up there, but also Crimea down here in the bottom left, and then into occupied Luhansk in Ukraine itself. So that's where the attention was, but then that's only 9:30. So that's 11:33 at night, Ukrainian time. Anything after 11:33 that was launched then won't feature on here. The claim was that there were 400 sent into Russia. Just incredible numbers are happening every night from both sides. So at this very moment, said Vizhina last night, Ukrainian kamikaze drones are attacking Russian military facilities in western Russia's Tula region. So Tula features quite a lot. More than 10 powerful explosions were heard near the settlement of Novomoskovsk, followed by a large fire, according to local reports. Now, maybe not exclusively, but at least one thing that was hit in Tula was a chemical plant. So Ukrainian forces have struck the Eurochem nitrogen plant in Russia's Tula region with kamikaze drones. The facility has been actively cooperating with the Russian military industrial complex there. So some fairly significant fires in the distance. And you can see another image there from Tula. Then we heard from Russian media sources themselves that a drone crash in the Tula region caused a fire in the Azot chemical plant. The Azot enterprise in Novomoskovsk is one of the largest producers of nitrogen fertilizers and ammonia in Russia. And they say that a bit of drone debris. The fire at the Azot chemical plant has reportedly been extinguished, but guess what? They blame for the cause of the fire. In the Tula region, air defense forces on duty shot down several aerial targets, and as a result of falling drone debris, a fire broke out at the Azot chemical plant, the region's governor reported. So again, it's old debris what did it. But actually, it was a pretty significant fire there. Having caught up the stories earlier today, said Tim White last night, I now need to bring you up to date on Ukraine attacking targets in Russia. Moscow says it shot down 32 drones this evening, with most over Kursk. But clearly, Dr. One, as in drone, and Miss Debris have renewed acquaintance with an old friend in Tula Oblast. This is the Azot chemical plant in Moskovsk on fire again. It was only on the night of May the 23rd and 24th that Ukraine's drones temporarily shut the factory down after major hits. Then, so you can see here some major fire taking place at that facility. Okay, moving on. So that is, or not moving on. That's another view of Novomoskovsk. Right. Then we have in Azov, Rostov region, a warehouse of where components for drones were manufactured caught fire. I'm presuming that's a strike. No idea. It caught fire. I imagine, well, it could be sabotage in Rostov, but my money would be on a strike. Rostov, by the way, if we're going to go to the map, let's go back to here. Rostov is down here. There's Rostov on Don. So Rostov is your oblast around here, relatively close to Ukraine, really, just across Donetsk, and then you get into Rostov. So it's quite easy to hit. And I would imagine that that was struck. Anyway, pretty significant fire at a warehouse that kept drone components. And then we had drones hitting Lukoil's Kosovo refinery in Russia. Yesterday, again, this is in the daytime yesterday, sparking a bitumen tank fire and a 100 square meter spill. The plant, processing 17 million tons of oil yearly, produces fuel, diesel, jet fuel, bitumen. A plane-like drone was seen before the blaze. So yeah, really significant there. And lots of imagery was coming out of Kosovo. Nizhny Novgorod welcomes drones, it says here. Really huge blaze going on there. Massive plume of black smoke in Nizhny Novgorod. Here we have the Lukoil enterprise in Nizhny Novgorod. A little bit later, just massive dense clouds there coming out from a very significant fire. And then, so that moving on from that far, so we've already gone through Novomoskovsk, through to Azov in Rostov, through to Nizhny Novgorod, and now we're on to Melitopol. So Melitopol is in Zaporizhia Oblast in the occupied. It was where the Ukrainians were aiming for when they were during the May 2023 counteroffensive. So then there's a fire there at the Gidromash plant. I presume it's another strike. The plant specializes in high-pressure aluminium casting, precision steel castings, machining, and foundry equipment manufacturing. Really huge fire by the looks of it there. And indeed, so that was called the Gidromash in this one, Gidromash, sorry, according to Max 25. Here, Tim White says, early this morning, just before the end of the previous thread, I showed the Azot chemical plant in Tula on fire. Not long afterwards, Ukraine hit another facility, this time in Russia-controlled Ukraine. This is a Hydromash factory in Melitopol in occupied Zaporizhia. It's apparently become common knowledge in Melitopol that Russia has turned the Hydromash into a major repair center for the military. Coming off the back of Web 2.0 on the same front, things are suddenly looking more difficult for the invaders. So there is potentially a big old fire there at a repair facility in Melitopol, and that would significantly impede Russians' ability to repair equipment and get equipment to the front line, right? A warehouse of fuels and lubricants is on fire in Pushkinos. And then we're going to go from Melitopol in Zaporizhia up to Moscow region. So when the Ukrainians were sending heaps of drones yesterday in the daytime, this is what was happening. Just an incredible suite of burning stuff. A warehouse of fuels and lubricants in Pushkino in Moscow region, as you can see there from that still. Then that was reported in by Interfax. The area of the fire in Pushkino near Moscow has exceeded 8,000 square meters. Fairly sizable fire, that one. A warehouse is on fire. Inside are flammable liquids in barrels, gas cylinders, and pallets. So they're reporting that. And there's the, just again, absolutely insane footage of at least a half a dozen massive fires in Russia or Russian occupied territory. Russian Telegram channels report a fire in a warehouse storing oil and lubricants in Pushkino. Eyewitnesses say they heard explosions. And that fire was a 21,000 square meter fire and it spread into a neighboring building, according to Interfax. And then more data was being released after that. According to the latest data, the roof of the warehouse collapsed on an area of 13,000 square meters, and that's a view from above. So a fairly significant fire there. Okay, and this is that same fire from a different angle, different height there. You can see it was really significant. And then Engels was still on fire yesterday. So this is a Crystal oil depot in Engels. So that was imagery from yesterday. I've seen imagery from today, and it's still on fire today. So that is now, I don't know, 3-4 days after it started. Then we had a strike on some kind of parking lot. I don't know whether it was, it looks like a vehicle's been destroyed there. This is Nikolskoye in Belgorod region, 18 kilometers from the border. So that's going to be your kamikaze drone. Really, I should have had that in the last section. That's not your sort of long distance ones. Then some more firms data. Crimean Wind reported that this is from this morning. A fire broke out last night at the fuel depot at the Krimsk air base in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. So if we're going to go to Krasnodar Krai, that is opposite. So that is here. So you've got Rostov-on-Don's up there. This is a Krasnodar Oblast. In fact, you've got Krasnodar. That's that location there. That's basically, if you go across the Kerch Bridge, that you're into Krasnodar. So this was then hit, as you can see here. Firms data analyzed by Crimean Wind said something was on fire at that airbase. And then this is what's been happening pretty much now or this morning. Crimea, Sevastopol, southern coast of Crimea, Novorossiysk. So that's on the, again, if I'm going to go back to that, that's Novorossiysk right at the bottom there of the map. That is where the Russian, so they've moved from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk as the home for the Black Sea Fleet. That has also been targeted this morning. Neptune anti-ship missiles have been reported. So then what I sort of, in answer to what someone said earlier, Zelensky said, we have come very close to the moment when we can force Russia to stop the war. We feel it. So it's really interesting. Like, hopefully you get a narrative going on there of all of those things exploding. And that's a mere fraction of what Ukraine are doing on a nightly basis. And we know Russia are doing this as well. But I'm not wholly sure that Russia are having the same strategic effect on Ukraine in terms of hitting. There's an awful lot we don't know about what Russia has hit. It has to be said. So Russia does send a lot of stuff into Ukraine, and we don't hear a lot about it. But we also we hear even less about what Ukraine hits. And I get a sense that after a day like yesterday, where you do manage to see loads and loads of burning things, that Russia is going to be hurting. And so for Zelensky to say, look, we're close to the moment where we can force Russia to stop the war. But the big but there would be, okay, well, what will that take? Will take the US coming on board and actually doing something useful, which they haven't done for the last 3 months, particularly. There's no attempt to aid Ukraine. In fact, it's looking even less likely that Trump is going to do anything to help Ukraine going forward. I just can't see it at all. Now, Russian forces are bolstering Moscow's air defenses. Radio Svoboda has identified 2 new positions near the A135 Amur depot and south of Domodedovo airport with the Pantsir system. This analysis comes after Yandex started blurring additional military-related facilities on its satellite maps. Talked about yesterday how Yandex, which is the Russian version of Google and their mapping service, has usefully helped out Ukraine by blurring stuff to say, oh, this is militarily sensitive, which then gives you the location of something that's militarily sensitive. So you don't even have to really know what's there. You're like, well, they blurred that out, so let's hit it. Doesn't matter what it is, we'll hit it. Thank you, Yandex. But it could well be that some of these are Pantsir air defense system emplacements. Just seeing if there's anything else that we can learn from anything coming out recently. Okay. No. I don't think there's any other strikes that. No, that's a military base. I've already shown you that one. Yeah, so there's nothing else that I'm aware of yet from at least that list of sources. Right, so now we're going to go on to other bits and pieces, and we'll start with. In fact, what I'll do before we start that, I'm going to bring my tired old face back into it and have a chat to you guys for a second, just so I can gather my senses, see what JR has lined up. Thank you to all of you who are helping out. I really appreciate that, helping the channel. Goose Springsteen. The UK Strategic Defence Review was good, but John Healey, our Defence Secretary, recently had to roll back a commitment to 3% defence spending by the next Parliament. How can rhetoric about war with Russia be serious if we cannot make such commitments? The question is, why has he done that? And is it acceptable that he's done that given... I mean, the why is we've got no money, and we're also very desperately trying to make money for education, just like any other country, and the NHS, and spending reviews just come out, and it's looking a bit positive, but everything's going to be dependent on our growth. And the problem is Trump has started a trade war with Europe and the UK, even though that we've done a kind of quasi deal. We are getting hit with tariffs on key sectors. Our growth forecasts are going to be scaled back, as everyone's in the world are, as a result of what Donald Trump has done. And so, things are going to hurt every nation's attempts to support Ukraine. Money is not infinite, right? And it's going to rely on a lot of borrowing. And at the moment, UK, compared to many other countries, has a really high borrowing burden. We've got a debt burden that comes an awful lot from borrowing, much more than, say, Germany. Although they've changed their rules, they're going to be borrowing a lot more, and that's what's going to underwrite a lot of European defense spending is coming from what the EU is doing. But we're not in the EU, we can't access that kind of borrowing funding. We're not prepared to do so, so that puts the UK in a bit of a bind. Now, you can argue we still need to spend that money, which is fair enough, and you can easily make that case, and I can make that case, but it comes at a cost. So it's a kind of zero-sum game. If you're going to commit to 3%, then which department are you going to say is going to take it? Is it education? So and that's a problem. And this is, every country in the world has to make a choice as to whether they fund healthcare or bonds. Now, we can have big arguments about what is the single most important thing for a government to do. And you can argue quite successfully, probably, that security is the number one thing, because if your country is not secure and it gets involved in a war, then kind of healthcare and education kind of pointless, or they're less important, because you got to sort out the security stuff. So you can argue that security should be the most important, but then how much do you spend on that at the expense of other departments? So these are difficult decisions. I would not like to be in government right now, because I know that Ukraine is freaking important, and I know we need to spend way more on defense, but also know that if you overstretch there, you won't get voted back in, because your electorate will be like, why have we got inflation? Why are my kids going to a crumbling school? Why can't I get a doctor's appointment? And you can make all the arguments about Ukraine that you like. Those people at the ballot box will punish you. And the Labour government knows that. They know the strategic review is very clear on who the bad guys are. I did a video on this the other day. Fiona Hill and others are very much clear-eyed about Russia are the enemies and we need to spend X, Y, and Z. But it's just difficult to actually follow through on that. And yeah, sucks to be in government. Source of commanders, but he wasn't aware of fuel tanks involved. That would change things. I'm not sure. Fuel tanks, is that concerning the Su-35? Fuel tanks. So this is the train being struck. If it's similar to transporting cars with 4 to 6 normal cars per wagon, then there would likely be fewer if they're armored vehicles, especially if the wagons are single deck. So there are lots of conversations about that train, but without knowing anything more concrete, it's very, very difficult to speculate. I think. Kevin Force, thank you very much for your support there, mate. Really, really kind of you with the ATPGEO Politics memberships. Goose Springsteen, not a fair comparison. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Much smaller welfare state, but post Great Depression, UK defence spending went from 2.8% in 1933 to 7.4% in 1938. It does show even Chamberlain was very serious about rearming. Yeah, Chamberlain often gets a bad rap. Chamberlain sort of unfairly gets a bad rap for being Mr. Appeasement. But you're right, there were things that were put in place. The difference is, and you do kind of admit this, is comparing apples to bricks. Just life is way more expensive nowadays. There are so many things that the welfare state has to contend with. We have a more elderly population. We have, special needs provision in education that didn't exist in those days. And in fact, when you're talking about funding in the UK, we're just upping loads of funding on special needs. This is a big problem. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience. This is a real issue that societies are contending with. Modern Western societies. I don't know if there are interesting differentials around the world with sort of special needs manifestations in different societies and different geographical locations, but that's like a huge expense that didn't exist in 1930s Britain, right? And so just everything is more expensive. The drugs that we have now just smash out the water the drugs that we had then. And actually the NHS hadn't even been invented then, so that was post World War II, wasn't it? So the NHS now has, as you get these drug companies researching more and more expensive but amazing drugs, and it feels incumbent upon any health service to provide those drugs, but then you have extra costs and so on and so forth. So just the cost of living now become more and more expensive to some degree. But when we look at other metrics, like we spend less individually on food now as a percentage of our personal incomes than we did 50 years ago. So it's gone up from we've gone down from spending like a third of our income on food to something like, one of the figures recently was 8%. It's going to be up and down depending on inflation and whatnot, and average wages. But we spend considerably less on food than we used to. So we actually do have a lot more disposable income, which is why we have mobile phones and things, and people do have a lot more stuff than they used to have. I'm fairly confident of that, even though we talk about living on a poverty line. There are a lot of people on the poverty line. It's very difficult to kind of make universal sweeping generalizations. But, we perceive our lives are more expensive now because we perceive things as necessities like Wi-Fi. Is that a necessity? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's a luxury, but actually it's a kind of perceived necessity these days. And so, everything's more expensive personally, or at least there's a lot more things to spend money on, even if food is cheaper. And countries are just, I think, going through a period of having to work out whether we should just be taxing people a lot more. And this is a really sticky situation because people are going to whinge a lot about being taxed more, but it might get to a point where, look, life is just more expensive. Like it or lump it, you just got to have a higher tax burden. I think it's going to come down to that. Right, I'll do a couple more of these and get back to the content. Okie dokie, sending love from Oklahoma. Thank you, Okie dokie. Really appreciate that. And thanks for your continued support. You've been here a long time. Thank you. Joe Hales, likewise. Thank you. As always, appreciate all of your efforts. I appreciate all of your appreciations of my efforts. So thank you very much. And finally, Tom Marnie, a late thanks for the Musk Trump catfight live stream. That was interesting and still ongoing. So much to talk about that. I've got goodness me, if you're thinking about the LA riots and what's going on there at the moment with regard to the National Guard being the first time since 1965 that the president, the executive, has ordered the National Guard, over the heads of governors and whatnot, into a place to act. And then Trump today announced the National Guard has done an amazing job of sorting this out. Governor Newscomb in his Truth Social post. I mean, so childish, but he said that, and the National Guard hadn't even got to where they were going. They hadn't even been deployed. They hadn't been deployed, and he was saying they've done an amazing job. They're sorting out all of this crime and blah blah blah. It's like, dude, they're not even on the streets. You're just lying. Anyway, I digress, as is my wont. There's nothing you can do about it. Right. Okay. Well, you can turn off the video, but please don't. A couple of claims from Moscow. So we're going to other bits and pieces, as I normally do at the end of the video. Right. A couple of claims from Moscow now, says Tim White. Firstly, it says a Neptune guided missile was shot down over the Black Sea. So I just added this in because we have claims that Neptune missiles are flying over to Crimea. Russians have claimed they shot them down. Russia also says its troops have broken through the regional border into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. This is something that was almost certainly going to happen. In a number of places, they were only, as according to my last mapping update a few days ago, they were only a few hundred meters, maybe to 2 kilometers away from Dnipropetrovsk in several places. If they get a toehold in that oblast, then that could give the Russians the impetus to claim that Dnipropetrovsk is now theirs, constitutionally theirs, and they'll add it to their constitution and say they own it, and therefore, as part of the negotiations, Ukraine now has to get out of Dnipropetrovsk as well. And that is why the Ukrainians were, I'm sure, fighting hard not to allow the Russians into Dnipropetrovsk, but they might well have failed. That's a claim from the Russians. Now, I say worryingly, this should have happened years ago. In fact, Fighter Bomber, the Russian Telegram channel, who is, I believe, a Russian fighter pilot, has long been whinging about how the Russians just haven't done anything for 3 years with regard to protecting their planes. You go up to Olenia, Belaya, Ivanovo, and Ukraine, but that wasn't the one. I can't remember that third airbase that was struck the other day in Operation Spiderweb. But anyway, none of those had protection for their planes. Now, that should have been like job number 1 freaking 2 years ago. So this is well overdue, but it seems like the Russians are doing some construction. So Defmon here says there's some construction going on at the Engels airbase. That's right near to where the Crystal oil depot is burning still. Here he says, I suspect there are going to be new shelters for aircraft. And I don't know. Well, I don't know where exactly he's referring to, but essentially there's evidence of that. And actually is more than just Engels. Here, War Translated says Russia builds shelters for aircraft in 14 air bases, including occupied Crimea. Per satellite images, OSINT analyst Defmon reports construction in Kurovska and Yeysk due to intense Ukrainian airstrikes. So not just his previous tweet, but other places he's looked at as well, show evidence of building for the protection of their planes. Completely unsurprising, just very belated, and it looks like those are ones that are just considerably closer to Ukraine than places like Elenia that were here up in Murmansk near Finland. But so that's bad news for the Ukrainians, because it's going to mean it's harder for them to damage and destroy those planes if they do come and attack them again. It also means that they need to get to it now, really. Now, send those drones. Like I keep saying, though, I mean, it's difficult with drones because those drones that come all the way from Ukraine. So if we take a look at this map, right? If you're sending drones from here, like Lyuty drones, sizable one-way attack drones, and you're hitting Elenia up there, right? Those drones, if you're sending 100 drones to overwhelm the air defenses and hit the airport, you're going to be looking at the radars as a Russian, and you're going to be saying, well, they're going for Elenia, get all the planes up in the air. And so you have like 5 hours of warning to get your planes up in the air. For air bases here, you have maybe a couple of hours before your drones get there. And you know that they're going to be going for some of these bases, so you get your planes up. That's why they drove those containers of drones and sat them right next to the airbase. And it's a complete surprise. You don't have any warning. You can't get your airplanes up in the air. You go and blow everything up. So it's easy for me to say they should just overwhelm these air bases and send like 100, 200 drones at one air base and completely overwhelm the air defenses. Yeah, they may well do that. They may well overwhelm the air defenses, but there'll be no airplanes left by the time that those drones actually get there, overwhelm the air defenses, and then blow up on an empty runway. Yet you can take out some infrastructure. So you can take out lubricants and fuel and maybe control towers, stuff like that. Maybe even some ammunition storage facilities at these air bases. But as far as taking out the planes, you're going to struggle. And that's why you need something like ballistic missiles for those closer. They give you much less time. And there is talk that the Ukrainians have tested a new ballistic missile with, I think, a 400-kilometer range, is it? Something like that, 300 to 400-kilometer range. And they've tested it, and they're going to scale up production. We have heard this a number of times previously. But these sort of air bases, particularly, closer to Ukraine, they will be susceptible to ballistic missiles. Would you expend a single ballistic missile on a single plane? I don't know if that's the kind of, I'd be interested in what you think in the, I would think that would be worth it. These planes are used over and over and over again. I would just be creating ballistic missiles and then taking an air base and going, right, we're going to send 20 ballistic missiles at this air base, bosh, 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 and they won't have time to take off because ballistic missiles fly up and then come down super, super quickly. So you have very limited time, and then you need really good air defenses to take them out. But the point is, where are we going with this? So the air bases are getting reinforced. There's protection for the planes. They need to hit those bases. If they're going to hit them at all, they need to hit them now. But you can't really do them effectively with slow-moving drones that will take hours to get there. Reaching a ceasefire in 2025 is possible, but only through massive military aid to Ukraine, says French General Nicolas Richoux. Quote, Putin won't stop until he seizes all the regions annexed in Russia's constitution. That's why relevant to Dnipropetrovsk. Only a large-scale Western response, not sanctions alone, can alter his calculus. So you need sanctions and you need massive military response. Now, the French have been on the blower. So Jean-Noël Barrot, the French foreign minister, has been talking to Marco Rubio about support for for Ukraine, but essentially the Americans are clearly scaling back support for Ukraine. The Senate bill will be watered down even without. So by the Senate bill, I mean Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. They are trying to put forward this really heavy sanctions bill, 500% tariffs on Russia or any nation who buys hydrocarbons off Russia. If you do, the reality of doing that, and it sounds really good, and I'm really for this, but if you do that, you are going to exacerbate an already fractious relationship and trade war between the US and, say, China and India. All right, they're just trying to hammer out a trade deal. They haven't got any trade deals yet. 90 days are almost up and they've got 0 trade deals. They're trying to hammer one out with India. If you then go, right, if you buy anything off Russia, we're going to absolutely screw you over with these huge, really hardcore sanctions and tariffs, then that becomes an issue. So an issue with regard to the relationship between these countries. So the Senate is going to want to temper some of those more extreme elements of that Blumenthal and Graham bill, and that's a problem because you'll end up with a kind of half-assed effort because you're trying to appease all these people that are going to be voting on the bill, and you also don't have the support of the president. The executive will not support this bill. And that's a real shame because, as this French dude says, you need really heavy military support for Ukraine, which the US is not giving, and you need sanctions, which the US is not helping with. And that's a real shame. Now, just a few more bits and pieces here. Every cornerstone of the Russian economy is collapsing, says Jay in Kyiv. If only Trump was smart enough to figure out that all the Russian cash he's eyeing won't even exist by the time he thinks he can get his hands on it, he could save Ukraine and have statues of himself all over Europe. So Evgen Istribin says, more bad news for Russia as official government statistics agency Rosstat reports catastrophic losses across the entire corporate sectors of oil, gas and mining for both February and March. The highlights for February are mining was down 61%, oil and gas was down 73%, and then for March, mining was down 89% and oil and gas was down 106%. Things are looking bad for the primary ways that the Russian government can raise cash to prosecute its war against Ukraine. And this is why I think you go back to Zelensky saying, we're getting us to a stage where you can see this war ending, if the ducks are aligned, because Russia are in trouble. And this is what underwrites my frustration. When I get angry about Trump and the Trump administration, it's precisely because they had every chance to tighten the screw, to keep the foot on the neck of the Russians, so that there was no blood pumping to the extremities of the Russian society and economy, and there would be no energy going to the war machine, to the vital organ of the Russian war machine. And so the US had the chance and they decided to do the exact opposite. That's my anger. My anger is like, it was in the palmy hands and you let it slip through. So frustrating. But without the US's help in these matters, we can see that Russia is really struggling. And that just adds to frustration. What could have been? Cybercorp of Ukraine's GUR took down Russian railway services. The GR experts disrupted ZD.RU with a 6 gigabyte attack, 2.5 million packets per second, leaving users unable to access RZD resources. RZD confirmed the infrastructure hit. I barely understand what I just said, but you get the point. There was just a big attack on the Russian railways. You can read the details of the geekery on the screen by pausing it now. Okay, if you didn't realize that Elon Musk was completely pro-Russian and compromised, then there should be no doubt now. What do we know? Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, and I know they don't have the best of relationships, but I would argue that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree here. In fact, I wrote an article on it was titled exactly that. The Musk apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I think I called it. Elon Musk's father arrived in Moscow to speak at the Future Forum 2050, organized by none other than Alexander Dugin, the ultra-nationalist, genocide-advocating philosopher that underwrites Vladimir Putin's own ideology. Alexander Dugin is a terrible human being, but he's just organized this forum in Moscow that Errol Flynn has bloody turned up to be a keynote speaker. That's Elon Musk's dad. Errol Musk has already expressed his admiration for Moscow and called Russians some of the smartest people on the planet. Well, that's lovely, Errol Musk, you absolutely heinous individual. Elon Musk's father to attend pro-Kremlin event in Russia, hosted by the far-right ideologue Alexander Dugin. The event will be hosted by the Tsargrad Institute, which is just a terrible entity anyway. And Alexander Dugin, just such compromise at the center of everything. Now, I want to play you this, so let's play you. I'm going to have to do it a slightly different way because it's on a different browser. And let's now get this. Okay, so this is Zelensky in an ABC interview. I think this is insanely important what he says here, and it's regarding the fuses for the Hydra 70 missiles that the US recently said couldn't go to Ukraine, and they sent them to the Middle East instead, to their own forces in the Middle East. And this was recognized as quite controversial, and I don't think people are sold by the idea that the US particularly needed them, and so that it was an emergency, and suddenly these fuses went to the Middle East for the Americans. But it seemed to be more of a sabotaging of Ukrainian efforts, and that is, of course, pretty controversial. So I'm just going to share this window. There we go. Right, hopefully then you can hear this. So we're going to hear Zelensky himself. It's only 20 seconds, but here's what he says.
We counted on this project. 20,000 between us, 20,000 missiles, anti-Shahid missiles. It was not expensive, but it's special technology. So We counted on these 20,000 missiles. Today in the morning, my Minister of Defense told me that the United States moved it to the Middle East. We counted on this project. 20,000 between us, 20,000 missiles, anti-Shahid.
So 20,000 missiles. And he doesn't know, like, why the hell were they just suddenly sent off somewhere else? Frustrating. So he's evidently really frustrated, and I think that shows the huge issues in the relationship between the United States and Ukraine. Andrew Perpetua's in the live stream, in the live chat. Andrew, if you want to come on and have a chat, I can send you a link if you want to do a quick 15-minute chat, and then we'll call it a day. That will be great. I will send you a link to pop on if you want to on your Twitter message here. So if you would, that'd be amazing. But of course, it's completely up to you. You're no doubt a busy man. And we can talk about where the loss lists are and why everyone's been screaming out for them. But I've sent that through to you. So if you want to come on, please do. So I just want to give a bit of a thanks to, okay, that's awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Right, just a few more thanks. Richard Bennett, thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on board. F Oink, full responses coming. Trump's 2 weeks rubs off. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. 2 week, 2 week, 2 week. Taco Trump, as ever, is just too weak. Stephen Bendel, thank you so much. Is it really retribution to keep doing the same thing you do anyway? Yes, exactly. Russian retribution is just more of the same, maybe just a little more. Anyway, so Andrew, welcome on board. You were saying no airbase is safe now.
No.
What do you mean with regard to that?
Well, the drones can hit anywhere now, even in places that are out of range, apparently. So, and also you have to keep in mind that the drones that Ukraine used in that attack are really kind of low-level, low-capability drones. They have a lot better drones. They could have used better drones. I think the reason they used the drones they used is they just wanted more drones. Like, they wanted more bites at the apple, even if each bite was smaller. But they could have sent much more capable drones if they wanted to. And in further attacks in the future, they might end up doing that.
Yeah.
And
of course, they'd have to come up with a different method, because once bitten, twice shy. The Russians, I don't think you're not going to have that same method being used again. But that's not to say there aren't.
Why not? Realistically, other than checking every single truck, which would crush their economy, especially because their rail system right now is like in a ton of trouble. I don't know if you've seen the stats on their rail, but it's bad.
Yeah, I know Prune 60 has been doing some really interesting analysis on loading and stuff. Yeah.
So if you want to go check every truck, you're going to cripple your economy. So if you're into that sort of thing, then go for it. So other than that, like, what are they going to do? You can't set up air defenses. Were you going to put like 5,000 guys at every airbase with rifles to shoot down the drones? Like, what else? Like, you set up EW. These drones are like immune to EW. So what are you going to do? Like, I don't really know what options they have, really, other than just using a lot of guys with rifles to physically shoot down the drones, and or building some sort of structure to put the planes under, like a defensive hangar or of some sort. But that takes years and costs a lot of money. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's just trying to make these things inside Russia is the difficulty, isn't it? I presume, well, maybe they didn't make those containers in Russia, but they certainly assembled the drones. There was, I guess it's just the logistics of trying to do that again, but they did it once and they can do something similar again, quite possibly. So, yeah.
so much is getting smuggled into Russia. Like their economy is based on smuggling. They're a smuggle-based economy. So if you're smuggling everything already, you're already like looking the other way.
There are so many people, you know, this economy is going to be, or this society is going to be a society ripe for the picking in terms of money. There'll be people that are willing to turn a blind eye, or in the same way that the Russians are using the Ukrainians to do things abroad as well. You know, everyone has their cost, right? Everyone has their price, don't they? So I guess there are Russians that would be willing to facilitate that.
Yeah, and if not Russians, then there are Armenians and Georgians
Tajiks,
and
Kazakhs. Yeah. You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. There
it's,
are a lot of unhappy people, no doubt, scattered around Russia for different reasons.
it's non-trivial for Russia to defend against this. It's non-trivial. And also, like, a big benefit of the attack, other than just, you know, taking out the planes, is causing this chaos. We, like, you want them to check every truck because that'll
and they are. So
economy.
there's going into Chonhar, in the north of Crimea. The massive truck tailbacks. There were all over Russia. I don't know if they still are, but certainly it has caused problems already.
Yeah.
Mate, do you have? I mean, you're across loads of different sources. You are Mr. I have watched a gazillion videos in the last 2 minutes, man. Have you seen anything about this railway Spiderweb 2.0 thing that the Southern District have announced?
No, I haven't.
It's interesting because the Southern District announced it, and the Ukrainian General Staff figures spiked yesterday in perfect accordance with the numbers that they mentioned.
Yeah,
so I'm positive it's happened, but I don't want to be too positive and too hopium, because you've got to wait until the video comes out. But it would be a real disappointment if it's all, like, it can't just be, they're not going to want to lie. So it has to have happened. Well,
why wouldn't they lie? They could lie. They could lie.
Yeah, I don't know that there'd be any long-term benefit to that, or even short-term benefit. I don't. Yeah. Anyway, but so you've heard nothing other than what's out there in the kind of mainstream areas.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about that train. No.
Okay, fingers crossed. Next question. Your loss list, mate. I am part of my soul. I don't believe in souls, but part of my soul has like died because your loss lists aren't there and those beautiful colored sheets. What are the reasons, just to tell my viewership who have become accustomed to them?
Here, I can show you. I can actually probably show you something, and then you might understand.
I assume it's going to be the sheer. I've been explaining that it's a sheer volume of stuff that's just it's impractical.
I'm gonna try to figure out how to show this without messing everything up. Maybe this button. Yeah.
Okay, let's try and get that a little bit bigger. Does that help? I don't know if that's any better.
Okay, I'll just zoom in because I'll press the old zoom in button.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So, okay, let me see what you can see. Yeah, you can see what I can see. Okay, so I'm trying to make this so that you can see what I want you to see. Okay, so anyway, so this is how much work in the backlog I have to do. Okay, so yesterday I finished like this much backlog yesterday. So I did March 29th through April 9th. I'm currently working on April 10th. Okay, and this here is the issue is April 12th through 21st was fell really behind, like just massively behind. And the reason why is because I had a backlog for March and February. So I spent this week finishing that backlog, and this made a new backlog. So if like right here, I have like 1,000 lines to do and 248 vehicles. That's what this is. So this is like the left column is how many lines I have to check for errors, and the right is how many vehicles I have to check. So it's like 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. But anyways, after April 21st, it's like very little. Like there's this half day there, and then like some of these half days that are like partially done, and then yesterday is basically punted. So and today's going to be basically punted. So yeah, this is why. So I basically have to work through this backlog.
So will you ever release any more loss sheets?
Well, I mean, I have these days. I have the 29th through the 9th. I don't know if they're worth anything.
I mean, I'd happily talk about them endlessly.
Like, oh boy.
You need to clone yourself, basically, Andrew.
Yeah. So like, this is like the 29th. I don't know if you can see this, but so like the 29th is done, and a lot of these other days are done. So
that's just one day.
Yeah, that's the 29th.
Yeah.
And there's like the 30th and the 31st. So like these are all like done now. And also I think like some of these days were never published, like the 21st and whatnot. But anyways,
well,
it goes up to the 9th. And then I have like this sheet, which is like how many Russians died per day.
Wow.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I talked about that the other day when you had a comment about how the average went from a fairly low set of numbers, then spiked up over winter, and is now back down, but it's not down as low as it was. So even though it's lower comparatively to winter, they are still losing some fairly considerable numbers, which tracked what you said, tracked exactly with the Ukrainian general staff figures, which I thought was interesting. So you go back early into the war, and we were talking about 600, 700, 800 people, maybe, and even less, depending on where it was in the war. And then that spiked up to 1,500, 1,700, 2,000, crazy numbers. And then that's come back down to consistently between 1,000 and 1,300. And that's what you were saying with your own kind of, it's really interesting when official numbers are backed up by not anecdotal evidence, but trends in looking at socials.
Yeah. So this right here, this column is how many died, and this is how many days I've been counting. This is how many died, and this is the cumulative total. Okay. So this is just going back to February 1st, which was day 158. So you see like this was like a 400 day. So, but like a lot of these are all like 130, 120, 100, and then like 300. And so like as time goes on, like the number, like this is like still back when it was high. I haven't gotten to where it lowered. It lowered in like May. So like I just finished like April 9th, and that was 202. So these are still like really high. Yeah. So like I can like draw a chart of this, I guess. Like insert chart, and then we can see like a little line chart maybe. I might have to like zoom out because I'm like zoomed in all the way, but
which is fairly consistent. That's interesting.
Well, this is not displaying what you think it is.
That's the total.
Okay, I need to make a smarter chart. Okay, we'll go like this. So yeah, that's
wow, yeah.
So yeah, it kind of like goes up and down, up and down, up and down a lot, but you can see like this is even slowly increasing basically over time.
Yeah.
But like this line, it kind of like levels out in May, and then at the end of May it like starts going down again.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of what the
now it's like here. It's like going up and down like around this area.
Mm.
So like between like 40 and 140, like, and its average is probably like 85 or so.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, which is still more than the earliest time that you were doing this.
Yeah.
But certainly less than it was, which is, you know, what you'd expect from knowing what's been going on the front lines.
Yeah, when we started, it was like 40 a day. And now it's like 80 something.
What are your thoughts about just a couple of things to sort of, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but a couple of things. What are your thoughts on what's going on the front lines at the moment? Just very general synopsis, particularly sort of Sumy, Pokrovsk.
Well, I mean, it's not great. But I don't know. It's not great. So like in Sumy, they're kind of advancing through the kind of plain. It's kind of like an uphill plain where Ukraine is on the uphill part and Russia's kind of climbing up the hill. But this plain basically ends soon because like you see that like giant forest there.
Yeah.
So there's like not much left of the plain. The problem is that once you get to those towns in the forest, like once you reach that forest, like even the most northern towns in the forest, you're in artillery range of Sumy.
Yeah, it's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, so
artillery and then FPV drones, you know, even more likely, and it becomes you're trying to make it like Kherson. Yeah,
no, they're gonna make it like Vovchansk. They're gonna erase Sumy, I think.
Right, right, okay, even more. Okay, so that's even worse. I was saying that it's going to be as bad as Kherson. You're saying no, it's going to be worse.
No. Kherson is kind of the best case scenario because Russia does not want to destroy Kherson. They view Kherson as a Russian city. Sumy, they don't care. They want to destroy it. They want to depopulate it. They want nobody there anymore. They're going to try to take out as many civilians as possible and depopulate the city. They want to erase it.
So, I mean, it's quite difficult terrain here, as in it's fairly open. There's some topography to concern themselves with, and there's obviously the forest that the Ukrainians can use as a natural barrier. And I presume there are some half-decent defenses somewhere around here. But do you think that the Russians are going to succeed here in getting close enough to cause Sumy right?
Oh, yeah. Sumy is in so much trouble. Like, they're already in range to like really damage Sumy a lot. They're probably going to push all the way up to the forest, I imagine. And once you hit the forest, you're more or less in artillery range. If Russia only gets to the forest, then they're in like extreme artillery range. Like the artillery will be shooting at the top end of their range. If they push even a little bit south of the top end of the forest, like what's the name of that town, like Krovna or whatever, like if they get to like that town, they will be within just normal tube artillery range. So like the range of their artillery is about 14 kilometers. So if 14 kilometers is normal range, so you can shoot that all day long. Anything more than 14 kilometers is like long range, where you can't shoot it that much because it wears out your barrel.
Yeah.
Because the way artillery works is that you have like charges, and like the more charges you use, the more damage it does, and it grows like kind of exponentially. So like 14 kilometers is like a 2 charge fire, so that deals like average damage to your gun, whereas more than 14 requires 3 charges, and that wears out your barrel really quickly.
Yeah, big
and
bang.
I think like 7 to 8 kilometers is 1 charge, and that you can shoot that for like forever. It like does very little damage to the barrel.
So is there anything Ukraine can realistically do with the amount? I mean, who knows what number of reserves they have? Do you think that they do have any significant reserves at all?
They can stop Russia from getting to Sumy. Like, I don't think there's any real threat of an invasion of Sumy. but they can't stop Russia from bombing Sumy to nothing.
Yeah. So that's depressing. Then you've got Vovchansk area. Is there anything going on there? The Ukrainians, the Russians seem to have started moving back south again there.
They're trying to move east. What's the name of that town? Like Tishi?
Yeah.
They're trying to move east through that town, and even trying to go around it, like through that forest over there. Yeah, so that's what they're currently trying to do. Like, Ukraine has completely pulled out of the northern part of Vovchansk. Like, they've pulled across the river.
Okay, I was wondering that. Right.
Ukraine used to control the aggregate plant, but they're not there anymore. And Russia has advanced pretty significantly in the northern half of Vovchansk. So that whole northern section is pretty much lost at this point. Parts of it might be contested,
which doesn't really make any difference. I mean, the whole place is flattened anyway. But it does show that the Russians are still trying to push there, and they are.
The Russians view Vovchansk as one of the greatest failures of the war for them. It was a total failure. Like, could not have gone worse.
Well, yeah, because they're all trying to get these big attacks down south, and actually they didn't get very far at all.
They didn't even capture Vovchansk. It's like they spent all of their resources and they couldn't even capture half of it. So it's like it was a total failure, and it was largely due to failure of planning for the Russians. They bungled it. It could not have gone worse, and it's really embarrassing. A lot of Russians want those generals to be demoted and fired, but I think some of them were promoted.
Well, then you got the one that I don't know if he was in charge at the beginning. What's his name? The guy that made a right cock up down south, and then he was moved to be in charge here. And then anyway, I forget his name. So then moving along, I'm slightly worried about Oskil here, the northern Oskil, north of Kupiansk, where the Russians have got across the river. I presume they can't get too much mechanized equipment across there, but it's been some time, so they probably. But then they're starting to come down from the border.
Have you seen the BMP video? It's like old at this point, but actually pretty old. It's from like 2 or 3 months ago. But did you see the BMP?
I don't know that I did.
They tried to cross the river in a BMP, and it just like went out of control and just floated down the river.
Nice.
And it sunk.
I saw I think a Ukrainian BMP crossing the river the other day, and a fish jumped in. Actually, it's the second time I've seen one of them.
That video is from before the war, by the way. But it is really funny.
Right? Yeah.
It was like a training before the war. I actually think, if I remember right, I might be wrong about this. I think that
probably why I've seen it before then.
I think it was in Kherson. Because they used to train crossing the Dnipro River over by Kherson. I think that's where that's from, but I'm not sure.
So they're slightly worrying that they're coming across the border, because I was expecting to have done that much earlier, but they seem to be doing that.
Crossing that border is a nightmare. It's a true nightmare. It's a like swampy horror.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough. I was saying that it must be difficult because they would have done it previously, so I was thinking it would be heavily mined. And
they've gotten some trucks and stuff in there, like they had like an assault Ural in there, and it blew up. But yeah, they try. It's a nightmare to cross up there because it's just swamp and. But yeah, they definitely crossing the river, and they're advancing still into what's the name of the town, Kinjushka or whatever. Anyway, so
it's good news that the Ukrainians have stopped them sort of north of Kupiansk, and actually most of the way around here.
People are asking about Tatkino. Tatkino is interesting because we don't know who controls Tatkino anymore. Ukraine may have captured it.
Wow. Yeah, because they came up this tree line. There was a fortification here that they took, then possibly contested here, possibly contested, if I remember, up here by that.
There was an interesting story. I don't know, like last week, where you see those ponds like to the east of Tatkino, like kind of where the blue arrow is. Those ponds there. There was a story that a Russian had broken through the Ukrainian line near there, that 2 Russians broke through, and that they were caught up there. Like I'm trying to figure out a way to describe this. But anyways, they were caught and killed like roughly where your mouse just was. Anyway, so like yeah, so like right over there, like just north of the arrow. But that was interesting because they broke through the Ukrainian line to get what's in the red right now, because I never changed the map. Yeah, like right there. That's where they were caught. And that was behind the Ukrainian line.
Right. Okay. So that the assumption is the Ukrainians have control of a lot more here.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, this is good news. Ukrainians having some success there, and that'll be a thorn in the side. You'd hope it'll take troops away from Sumy, but it doesn't seem to be doing that.
This is so bad.
Really?
Ukraine capturing Tetkino is so bad for Russia because it strengthens their whole western flank. Because if you look at Tetkino,
it's clever because you've got the river there, so this whole area is nice and useful.
So everything west of the town is completely impossible to move through. There's a horrible swamp and a river. You can't go through it. It's a nightmare. So everything west is like you don't have to defend it. So you can defend just the town, and that defends everything. So then you use that as an anchor point to defend a line that moves south from Tekkino straight south. Okay, like do you see what I mean? So this is like an anchor for the defense. So now if Ukraine captures the town, they can basically build a line that goes straight south that then Russia will have a really hard time breaking through. Whereas if they don't capture Tekkino, Russia could break through the line through Tekkino. So this is like, it's kind of building a wall that Russia can't move through, because one of the biggest threats right now, because Russia can't really go through the forest. I think they're going to fail miserably in that forest. So they're going to have to pivot and move west. So this defensive line containing them to just this area is actually really important.
Yeah. So interesting. And it kind of, you've got the same river that comes up and along here. So it's kind of, that helps protect this whole area, from, I guess, them flanking all the way around there. But
what you're afraid of is them moving west, like just keep going west, all the way to like what's the name of that town, like Konotop and etc. That's like out west over there. It's actually critically important towns, that whole area out there. You don't want Russia getting there, so you want to contain them so they're just in this area near Sucha and Sumy. You don't want them moving west. So right. Tekkino is a really important aspect of this defense.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So Pischani, they have seem to have stalled there, which is good news. But it's not looking so good down around Terni and Torska, where they are moving towards the Oskil River here. What are your general thoughts on that area?
Yeah, I mean, their goal is to get to Barova. And
well, that's further up north, isn't it? Up here.
Yeah, they're trying to kind of attack it from both angles. It's a bit disappointing that Russia's been able to advance as much as they can. We kind of attribute it to a lack of drones, because otherwise it's hard to explain why this is happening. One thing that we know happened is that Russia has shifted all of their forces. A lot of forces were further north near the Third Assault, and the Third Assault like kicked their teeth in, and they basically ran away. So yeah,
because I was expecting these water features and the Sherebets River to have kind of held them back a lot better, but it didn't seem to happen. And once they came north of here, then they just, like, this all seemed to happen relatively quickly.
Yeah, and if you see all of the areas that haven't changed, those are basically all Third Assault to the north.
Right.
To the north.
Right.
The whole area to the north is the Third Assault Brigade or battalion. So they are defending and they launched some counterattacks and retook a bunch of ground. And then Russia basically ran away and transferred south into what you see here, this attack. So Ukraine just needs something like, because like this is like that's where the third assault is. So this area down there, I don't know. They need drones, I think, and also K2, the new drone unit. It's I don't even know what they are at this point. What even are they? They're going to become a regiment. They're becoming a regiment. I don't know what they currently are. Maybe a brigade, but they're going to become a regiment. But K2, that regiment is supposed to defend everything from Kupiansk to Siversk.
Right.
So and they are drone pilots. They basically they're drone pilots, EW, and other sorts of support, like communications, electronic warfare, signal intelligence, that sort of thing. That's what they do. So they are going to deploy from Kupiansk to Siversk. You may know the K2 battalion, which was an infantry battalion. They started out as a artillery
haven't heard much of K2 for ages.
Well, it's because Varys was promoted to becoming the head of the regiment. The regiment and the battalion are completely unrelated things, which is kind of confusing, even though anyway, so the battalion is still where they always were, like over near Siversk. But this regiment is going to be in this whole area as well. So, and they're currently deploying. I think they said they're deploying like a company every few days or something. So anyway, those drone pilots, I assume they're going to be focused on that area.
Yeah. Because you want to take that back, and actually, if you've got those water features there, then you know it would only take, coming down there, and then cuts all of that off. Maybe you've got worrying stuff at Bilahorivka, which was so solid for so long, but we've seen the Russians advance across the chalk quarry here, and have they really like come across all these mountainous areas? I thought that they would really struggle to take this, but it seems like times are changing.
Yeah, Ukraine basically withdrew. See, it's really weird that like blue triangle thing there. I have no clue what's going on there because there's no Russians there. But I'm not sure if Ukrainians are in that triangle. But anyways,
but this is quite mountainous. This is really like you've got the Seversky Donetsk River here, which is really steep-sided, so that you're not going to get across it there, and you're going to struggle to get across up these mountainous areas. But they seem to have done that, and the Ukrainians have pulled back. So, like, I don't know. It just seems to be giving up really good.
I really kind of specialize on following this area because it's just interesting to me. Also, it's because no one else follows it. I kind of did it because like it was like a big hole that no one else was doing. So I've been focusing a lot on tracking everything going on in this forest right here. And so from what I know is that the forest area that I have mapped is more or less accurate. And including that easternmost point that curls up. Okay, so that's all more or less accurate, and there's been absolutely no evidence to show that Russia has captured any of that forest at all, not 1 inch of it. Okay, so and the other thing that we know is that they have not captured that southern portion south of like Ryrivka. They've not captured anything south. So all we've ever seen them do is just jump on motorcycles and boogie on down that highway. They just go zoom, zoom, zoom. We've seen some really funny attacks where like they're zooming down the highway and it's just like one motorcycle gets hit by a drone and then another one gets hit by a drone, and they just all get wiped out. So that's what they're doing. They're just driving down the highway as fast as they can. Wherever they get, they jump off and hide in a hole, and that's it. That's what they're doing. So That's what explains that kind of red arrow and yellow area into Hrivka. So as for Bilahorivka itself, Ukraine withdrew. They withdrew. They withdrew to the hill, and then they withdrew beyond the hill. We're not even going to defend the hill, so they just pulled out. I think part of it was this attack in the south, where they kind of wrapped around the mine there. So yeah, but yeah, they captured that forest. Ukraine withdrew from Bilahorivka, and now it's all stuck again, where Russia can't advance anywhere. They're trying so hard.
Yeah, it looks like there's quite a bit of airstrike activity going on. And then we come down to Chaziv Yar and Konstantinivka being sort of approached from many different angles. Toretsk, New York, Chaziv Yar, and then Novolenivka and up the T0504 highway. Just a fairly quick synopsis of what you think is going on here and what the chances are for Ukraine to stop this.
It's confusing because I believe Ukraine has the forces to stop it, and it's confusing why it's advancing. So first off, if you go to like Kurdyumivka and that area, I think Ukraine.
Kurdyumivka along the Chaziv Yar and down.
Yeah. So Kurdyumivka, I think Ukraine is more or less withdrawing from there. And I think they're
here.
It's further south.
Not Kurdyumivka.
It's right there. Right there.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So I think they're pretty much withdrawing from here, and I think they're withdrawing back to like Bilahora or maybe even further back. So I think they're pretty much withdrawing back to. So there's a Bilahora, and I think they're kind of withdrawing to there, and if not even further back, I think they're kind of going to have this defensive line that is more or less maybe from Stopochki, although I don't know if Stopochki is actually in the defensive line, but it's basically going to go down from Stopochki down to like Bilahora, and then wrapping around. I think that's Ukraine's primary defense. I think everything forward of that defense, Ukraine is going to sacrifice at some point. They're kind of holding it because they can without much issue, but Russia is going to continuously attack, and that whole everything there is going to eventually get pulled out. Okay, so Toretsk, the Toretsk area is a quagmire. It's actually kind of funny. So the Toretsk area, Russia's having a ton of trouble. Like they're not really
they're attacking quite far back at these. There's this mine area. That area there, they seem to be trying to attack and maybe doing these crazy long distance attacks, like behind the line. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on in Toretsk? I've been kind of waiting for Audax to like finish his analysis of it, because Audax went on vacation at a very unfortunate time. He went on vacation, so like last week he was on vacation, and that was like one of the biggest weeks in like Toretsk news, and now he's back, and there's no Toretsk news anymore. But anyways, he's gonna like go work through all the stuff he missed, and eventually post some sort of analysis, and then I'll update the map to what he figures out. So my map of Toretsk right now is just kind of like chaos. But we do know that Ukraine advanced. Russia advanced into Delivka. We know they advanced up to that kind of vacation area or whatever along those ponds, and we know that they've been continuously bombing that I don't even know what it is, like a mine or whatever. And also
Terracon thing.
Dachna in the east is not captured by Russia, which is interesting. So
because we did have an attack by the Ukrainians that came down into this central area, and they hang out
want
for
to say
some time.
something.
Yeah.
That area where it says Dachna is not Dachna.
All right.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's just the map of Turretsk is actually very complicated. So where we have this like blue area, kind of like a hockey stick going down or a golf club thing, that's Dachna.
Right.
Yeah. So where they put labels is, I swear to God, they put them at random.
So the Ukrainians are still holding the Russians back somewhat there.
Yes.
But the Russians have been advancing up here, although I think the Ukrainians pushed back yesterday or the last couple of days somewhere around here. Possibly. That's what I heard from somewhere. But yeah, so this has been where they've used a lot of motorbikes and all sorts to kind of take, and they've taken quite a big chunk of land. I'd say quite quickly, but it's still only 300 meters a day. But 300 meters a day, if you don't care about lives, it adds up to being on the doorstep of Konstantinivka sometime soon. So, this is a problem.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is the sort of thing that I feel like Ukraine makes this mistake more than it should, and it always regrets it, where they are building up reserves. They have reserves right now. They're building up reserves, hoping to fight a long battle. And then they let Russia advance. And they're like, oh, no, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. They can advance a little bit here, a little bit there. And then by the time that Ukraine is ready, they're like, okay, we're ready to defend now. Russia has like cut off all the supply lines and they're screwed. So it's like, I don't know. We've seen this happen in like 7 different places already, and it's always very confusing to me. I feel like Ukraine is in the best situation now to defend Konstantinivka. Like they're in a better position to defend this than they ever were to defend Bakhmut or Avdiivka. They're in a much better position, but they're letting it fall apart. I don't know. It's weird to me. But you also have to keep in mind that this whole area is so huge that Ukraine will have opportunities for counterattacks.
Yeah. And then, they've held pretty well around Pokrovsk, but then
because Russia gave up. They're like, okay, we give up. They just moved everything. They like moved all the forces that were in Pokrovsk because we knew. I think I told you, we knew that Russia was never attacking Pokrovsk. Like we knew that. It was all a feint. And they have moved all the forces over. Like they just picked them all up and moved them over. So they're not there anymore.
But they are doing quite well further down south of there and even onto like Bakhtir. They're struggling in Bakhtir. Ukraine has done a good job to keep them at bay there, and at Oleksivka, just north of there. But north of that area, they're advancing. South of that area, I mean, goodness me, if you look where Vuhledar now is just bloody miles away. And Velika Novosilka has been, swamped. I can't even find it anymore because it's like right in the middle of bloody, there it is. Velika Novosilka used to be, well, anyway, the point is that they've moved a long way now, the Russians. Yep. Although, it's all relative, isn't it? And the cost for the Russians is huge, but, they don't seem to give a shit about that. So, yeah, it's slightly worrying that they are having this success. Any thoughts about this general area?
Not in particular. I don't think it's particularly important at the moment because Russia is moving north and not west. I don't care about them moving north. West is what matters. So as long as, because they're basically moving, they're moving parallel to the defensive line. So it's like whatever.
And then Ukraine had some success the other day around here again. It seems to be back and forth around sort of the west of Piatihaki and whatnot. So I don't know. There's a bit of activity going on there, but yeah, generally I don't know if there's anything else of note.
Not really. I mean, we've seen some changes to the map near like Kulepola, but I don't think they're advances. I think they're just clarifications and. Because we're just getting more video from there, or maybe it's just that I'm geolocating it more because I kind of like geolocating in Zaporizhia. I kind of it's relaxing to me. Other areas annoy me.
All
like
these big
Sumi
flat
area.
fields, trying to find out one tree line from another.
Yeah, I've kind of like memorized Zaporizhia. Like Sumi, I can't find anything in Sumi. Like I gave up. I don't even try anymore. But I like Zaporizhia, which is
Okay.
funny because like the guys who do Sumi can't find anything in Zaporizhia.
So, okay, what are you most hopeful about with regard to the Ukrainians at the moment? What are you thinking? Yeah, this is cool, or I think they could do this. What are your positives?
By the way, there are changes near Kherson too.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, hello. These back on the cards then.
Yeah.
Wow.
They've what's the name of that town? Dacha.
Yeah.
They've captured Dachi, and that kind of like coastal community there. So
which they had previously around the Krinky time. They were at the Antonivsky Bridge across there. They had that, and then obviously it kind of like went by the wayside.
The Russians are pretty heavily bombing it again.
Interesting.
But anyways, in the future, the things that we're going to see are more and better types of drones. Ukrainian drone technology far exceeds Russian at this point. I don't think there's any question about that. Their drone technology is it's getting like really out of control. Like their drones are getting really good. So there's going to be more powerful drones entering mass production right now that you probably won't see much of for the next few months, but maybe like 3 months from now, you'll start seeing those more advanced drones.
Are we talking like FPV range type drones, or are you talking like one-way attack drones, or both?
I think FPV drones are kind of like last year. I think like we're kind of like moving past FPV.
I know you said that on one of your comments the other day. You're like, everyone's still talking about FPV drones.
Yeah, it's like there are much more powerful drones than FPV drones, and I think FPV drones we're going to see them get phased out because like they're going to become more of a lower tier weapon. So like kind of a drone that
is that a scale thing? Sorry to interrupt you. Is that a scale thing though? Like so like Baba Yaga drones are great, but you had far fewer of them because they're easier to hit and whatever, they're more expensive, and you just had few of them. But if you had absolutely loads more, you still have the FPV drones still doing the kind of bang 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 bang, but then just have loads more of these heavy bombers. Like you then start having almost combined arms, like combined drones, like activity where you have just more of everything. Is that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is advances in munition types, right? So I think we're going to see laser guided munitions becoming more common. I think, and laser guided munitions then opens up fixed wing bombers, because now you can have a fixed wing bomber with laser precision, and a fixed wing bomber can carry a lot of load.
So you're talking like
aerodynamic lift.
Mini MQ-9 Reaper drones, but basically what MQ-9 Reapers used to do, but you can do that in a slightly smaller scale and much more localized.
Yeah. So we're going to see fixed wing drones with precision munitions. We're going to see heavier bombers with precision munitions. So instead of flying like 100 meters up, you can fly like 3 kilometers up and just laser pinpoint munitions on your targets. So I think FPV drones are going to be relegated to because they're very limited. When you watch like a lot of footage, you see how limited they are as a weapon, because they can only attack in a straight line. They can't attack in anything off of that line. So like there's a lot of times where you can't get a straight line to the target just because of geometry. And so like you can't get that straight line. You want to be able to like have a weapon that is offline. So like if there was like a little guy inside who could like throw the bomb, and so it would be just even a little bit offline, it would be better. And that's kind of why I like dive bombers, because a dive bomber, you can drop the bomb on an angle. But
so it's interesting. The other day, Magyar, so Robert Brovy from Magyar's Birds, who's now going to be in charge of the Unmanned Systems Forces, he came out with a list of what he's going to do in the first 100 days. And it's fascinating. But in the middle of that list, which I'm sure you've read, in the middle of that list, have you read that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've read the list. I can't remember everything on the list. But
in the middle of that, he said, "I'm not going to talk about these drones. Things are happening." You know, the idea was like, "There's some pretty cool stuff, but I can't talk about this." And that seemed to be like new tech, longer range kind of drone stuff. Maybe what you're sort of talking about there. So
yeah, there's going to be tons new attack drones of different types, using more advanced munitions. And that's one side of things. And then the other side is there's going to be interceptor drones becoming much more important.
I shared your video in this video or your picture I shared your comments yesterday about the Magyar hitting 33 kilometers behind the border with an interceptor drone. And yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's going to be that interceptor drone. In English, it's called Sorcerer. I can't remember the Ukrainian name. But anyway, it's Sorcerer. So that's a relatively expensive drone. I think it's like $6,000. So I think it's one of the most expensive interceptors. But anyways, there's going to be increasingly more interceptors of much higher quality, because like we've been talking about like interceptors that are like basically FPV drones, and those are like really low quality. And then there's been like fixed wing interceptors, but we're going to see like much more sophisticated interceptors moving forward, and they're going to be able to have a lot more capabilities. And I think it's going to turn these it's just going to become increasingly difficult for Russia to successfully do these drone raids like
so these are anti-Shaheeds as well as not just anti-Lancer and Orlans and Supercans and whatnot.
Yeah. The cheaper drones can take out that stuff. It's the Shaheeds that you need more expensive drones for, and especially the jet Shaheeds, which are increasingly dangerous.
400 odd kilometers an hour plus. Yeah. So because I as I reported in this video, so many things are burning at the moment today in the last 24 hours in Russia and occupied territories that I get a sense that Ukraine's really ramping up its one-way attack drones, and we don't always hear about their successes either. Now, part of that will be OPSEC, part of that will be not succeeding because they get shot down in electronic warfare. So I don't know the success rate, but there are claims even from the Russians that the Ukrainians are sent in 150 drones tonight. And you just don't hear anything about it, but you know that there's going to be some success behind the line. So I'm fairly sure Russia are hurting with, we hear a lot about the Russian attacks on Ukraine with their Shaheeds and whatnot, but the Ukrainians have just been consistent and large scale as they've scaled up production and hopefully capability as well. That I think that we're going to move into a phase, but I don't know whether I'm being too pro-Ukraine in this phase of Ukraine being able to turn the screw a little bit on Russia with their drone attacks into Russia.
I think there have been 3 major events that are critically important for the future of the war that have happened recently. First was the German aid package that they gave to Ukraine. That package is probably the most important package any country has ever given to Ukraine.
Well, the funding of the long range capabilities, but we don't quite know what it is. Some people are claiming they're Lyuty drones. Is that what you're talking about?
It's funded so many things. It funded their drone interceptor program. It funded, I believe, their ballistic program, and it's funded other drone programs. So that's an incredibly important thing. And also it's funding like repairing damaged vehicles and stuff like that, which is also really important. So so that's one thing. The other thing that's really important is that their ballistic missile has gone from the testing and development phase into the full production phase.
Oh, I mentioned this. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier in this video, actually. But yeah, the idea that this 400 kilometer ballistic missile, and now if they can scale production, that I was saying that is going to be the key. That if they can scale up, sorry to interrupt you, but if they can scale up production of ballistic missiles, and you can justify one ballistic missile per aeroplane, then you have got air bases within 300 kilometers, like it should have been with the ATACMS originally, suddenly under pressure, and I love it.
Yeah, and I believe that's probably getting funded by Germany. And the third thing is their development of future drones is like so good. Like their future drones are so good. Like
Germany.
I just mean Ukraine. Ukraine.
Right.
Their future drone programs are so good, and it's. I really want people to move beyond FPV drones, because like FPV drones in my mind are like, I don't even care about them anymore. Like they've become like into the same category as like an artillery piece, where like it's useful, but not super interesting to me. It's just kind of like an everyday weapon.
Yeah.
Whereas these
drones,
it's
literally substituted artillery to a substantial degree. But yeah.
Whereas these new drones are really going to be controlling the battlefield because they have so many capabilities. Like some of them do EW, some of them do signal intelligence, some of them do like repeating signal repeaters for communications, both communicating through like radios and stuff, which is really important because people are still unsure whether like Starlink is going to be around. So you need these repeaters, and also repeating for drone control. And then you're going to have the attack drones. There's drones for construction work, drones for pulling out wounded people. There's so many types of future drones that those are really like the key to everything is that technology being constantly pushed forward.
So I mean, the issue is that from the other side of the coin would be that a lot of these drones give them the ability to hit certain important targets and whatnot, but they seem to be less about the attrition of troops on a wide-scale basis. And what Ukraine doesn't have are boots on the ground. So what they appear to be trying to do is substitute troops with drones so that they have this drone line and a corridor, and that's kind of stops the Russians. But when the Russians can overpower or overcome that with just sheer numbers, then they can punch through, and there's no one there left to defend because most of Ukrainians appear to be flying drones rather than manning trenches. So how does that dynamic sit with you? Like, Ukraine still need a lot of people that they're not really able to get, and how long do you think the Russians can just simply not care about the drone technology because they've got enough people to overcome that?
Well, first off, Russia does not have enough people. It's like, I think this is a misnomer that people just want to believe. I don't know why.
But they've got enough people. But they've got enough people to take land. I mean, we've seen that for a while.
But people just have this thing where they want to believe Russia is like infinite. I don't know why. It's like, I don't know. It's like genetic, I think, maybe. But they have enough people for now. They don't have enough people for long. I mean, if you look at their recruitment numbers, they cratered. Like they've gone down like almost 50%. But
they went up. We heard a couple of months ago when they negotiations, and they crashed back down again. Right? Okay.
Yeah. So it's actually lower now than it was before. It crashed. Right. So then you have to. Is this a harvesting problem? Because I think that is a harvester problem, where the harvesters, you have a set amount of things, and you can remove them as much as you can harvest them over time. A little bit every day, or you can take them all up front, and then you have nothing. I think that's kind of what Russia did. They had, like 80,000 guys who were willing to fight, and they said, well, we'll take 60,000 now and 20,000 later. Whereas they could have said, we'll take it over, the span of the time. So anyways, the recruitment, I think, is a bit iffy. So anyway, so they have the manpower now. Yes, they have the manpower now. I don't think they're going to have it forever. I don't think they think they're going to have it forever. And I think that's why they're doing what they're doing, because they want to advance as much as they can, as fast as possible. That's been their strategy for the past year.
Yeah. There's nothing I disagree with. Yeah.
Regarding Ukraine, one of the biggest problems Ukraine has right now is that they don't know really how to defend in an effective way. And I think this is largely because the way drone warfare combined with everything else, the way it's changed the battlefield, has fundamentally made most of those, defensive principles kind of obsolete. Where like trenches are obsolete, bunkers are obsolete. So what you need, or at least like ground level bunkers, what you need is a underground defensive networks. And it's difficult. It's really expensive to go underground. And it's manpower intensive to an extent. It takes a lot of manpower to dig, but you can't dig that much at once. So anyway, so Ukraine has to develop some defensive principle. I have an idea for what I would do. I know what I would try. I would try what I think of in my mind as the Great Firewall. So what I would do is I would move back like 30 kilometers and just bulldoze everything in a big line and make a giant gap in the ground that Russia wouldn't be able to cross. That's what I would do personally. It would destroy entire towns and settlements, but they'll probably get destroyed anyway. So, but anyway, Ukraine has to come up with some defensive.
The problem, because Ukraine, it's not just about defending, but at some point they're going to have to retake land. Now, you either accept they're never going to militarily retake land and it's all going to come diplomatically. And if you accept that that's the case, then it doesn't really matter. Otherwise, they need to be able to... You can't retake land with drones. So drones can only do so much, and effectively defensive. Obviously offensive as well, but you've got to follow anything up with movement of people, really, and they just don't seem to have the capability to, on a large scale, in any large scale, be able to take land back.
First off, I just want to say you can retake ground of land, and Ukraine has done it. And I've written about how you cut off the supply lines, you starve them out, they withdraw, and then you move in. So that is a way to retake ground. Ukraine has done it. It's been very successful. Every time they have done it, it's worked. It's never not worked. It's always worked every time.
Where's a good example of that, where they've done that starvation?
Around Pokrovsk.
Yeah.
They cut off the supply lines. Russia had to withdraw. They lost several towns. They lost Udachna. They lost Shevchenko for a while, but then they had to counterattack. They lost several towns there.
The Dachna there, Shevchenko over here, which has been back and forth, but yeah.
Yeah. So
so they did a good job of hitting the supply basically in this whole area. Yeah. They did it also going to here, Solone, Spanivka.
Pischana.
You're moving back there. Pischana's up here. So yeah, but evidently not enough. Why did that not succeed ultimately?
Because Ukraine was not dedicated. It wasn't their goal to push back Russia. It wasn't their goal to, Ukraine's goal was they had a defensive line that they wanted to hold, and Russia crossed that line, and they wanted to push Russia back across. That's what Ukraine wanted. It was a very low level goal, and They were doing this with like a battalion doing it. And you have to realize a battalion versus a division. It was a Russian. They stopped a Russian division. Okay, a division, and they stopped them and retook ground. And this wasn't Russia giving up the attack. It wasn't Russia changing their mind and attacking somewhere else. They stopped a division and pushed them back with battalions, like two battalions. Okay, like this was a huge deal, and people are just ignoring it. And this was largely, like almost entirely, done by drones.
Yeah, because the problem is you're looking at maps so often that you don't realize the number of people on either side, and quite often what's entailed in the movement of the maps, and the fact that there could be a complete asymmetry there, actually to the disadvantage of the Ukrainians, and yet they end up pushing the Russians back. So yeah, it's a shame that as you say, because there looks to be topography here that would be advantageous to push the Russians back over. But
you imagine they stopped a determined Russian attack. Determined. It was all they wanted. It was like Putin's direct orders: move forward. You move forward. Determined. They were every man Russia lost, they had a replacement immediately to put a new guy in. Okay, they stopped them with drones and then retook a ground. That's crazy. That's insanity when you think about it. Like, and this was battalions. Imagine if instead of Ukraine spending a few battalions to stop a division, imagine they sent in like 10 brigades to do the same thing. They could have pushed back Russia a very long way. Okay, and this is something that is possible. I'm not saying this isn't a prediction. I'm just saying it's possible they could do this around Konstantinivka. It's possible. I don't even think it's likely, but it's possible. Okay, because Russia is really overextending their supply lines with these constant advances, because their supply lines are trash. So
how much larger is a division to a battalion? Can you just remind people of that? And it does depend on what army you're talking about, and also just really variable, by the way, on within, like, say, the Ukrainians, depending on where you're talking about and who it is.
A battalion is like 500 guys, and a division is like 12,000, something like that. Like, it's a lot bigger. Division is a lot, and it wasn't just the division. It was a division, 2 regiments, and a few brigades.
Yeah, impressive. But of course, the Russians would have been, far more, all around here, and the Ukrainians focusing on a couple of small places. But the point is,
no, that division was basically just this area. It was really
just in here.
Yeah, it was an extremely focused division. It's how Russia was advancing so much, because they had just like 10, 12,000 guys in like a little tiny area. Like where you're circling, like that was literally a division.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. Impressive that that was able to be stopped. Okay, so drone technology is looking good. One-way attack drones, ballistic missiles. Like I said from the beginning of this war, the way that Ukraine need to squeeze out their advantage and kind of scare quotes win is by using distance munitions. It doesn't cost Ukrainian troops if you are sending missiles and drones at the Russians, right? So they need to really focus on hitting the Russians with missiles and drones and rockets and artillery and all that kind of stuff, which they can. And it's looking up for the Ukrainians in terms of some of that. Well, not only the technology, but also the indigenous production within Ukraine. So they're producing 40 odd Bogdana 2S22s a month. That's really impressive, and it's going to be out. I presume they're outproducing the Russians in terms of SPGs, and they are producing more and more stuff like mobility vehicles as well. So that's looking good. What are you most worried about? Is there anything you have to say about production, first of all?
About production, I don't know. I don't really know how much they're producing for MRAPs.
Well, they've got senators being built in Ukraine now, haven't they? And they've got some of their own Novators and whatnot. But although I don't know how MRAP-y they are.
They're not an MRAP. They're like an infantry mobility vehicle.
Yeah.
Novator is typically a medical evacuation vehicle. Typically, that's like, it's kind of like, okay, so like Russia and Ukraine, they each have like vehicles that they dedicate to like medical evacuation, and there's kind of like this handshake agreement that they don't attack those vehicles as much.
Interesting.
It's kind of like, it's not that they won't attack it. It's like, it's not their priority to attack it. Like they'll attack something else first. So,
but they are hopefully. No, apparently they are making them now senators in Ukraine. So that's something, the MRAP variant, I'm pretty sure they'll be making. But anyway, the point, so you're not sure how many they're making, but they are at least ramping up production of all sorts of indigenous stuff. So it's certainly looking better than it was, one would think. And hopefully the BAE systems making howitzers, that'd be nice and useful.
Yeah. Their biggest problem are tanks. They're going to run out of tanks.
Yeah.
But I mean, what can you do? I guess ideally they would have more tanks. I think people genuinely don't realize how important tanks are, but they're really, really important, like extremely important. So.
Yeah, and I guess, it would help if they had some decent infantry fighting vehicles being manufactured. I don't know what's going on with the Lynx. There was a rumor that they had started making Lynx, actually, which the Germans, Rheinmetall, I think, but in Ukraine or for you. But anyway, I don't know that that's actually happening. But because if you don't have tanks, you need IFVs. And it'd be nice if they got like 500 Bradleys from the Americans, but that's not going to happen.
When people say how big these formations are, you have to keep in mind that during this war, typically battalions are smaller than they're supposed to be, but there's more battalions than they're supposed to be. Like, for example, when the war started, a Ukrainian brigade is supposed to be 6 battalions to a brigade. But now it's like way more. Like there's 9, 12, like I don't even know how many. Like there's so many battalions to a brigade now. And some, like the largest brigades are like 7,000 men in Ukraine. Like their brigades are basically divisions, and their divisions are basically army corps. So yeah, the divisions are much bigger in reality than they are on paper, I think.
Cool beans. Okay, so what are you most worried about? What I don't want to end on a negative, but hey.
I don't know. It's like the biggest thing is like the morale of the country is people losing faith in the military, because I think in 2023 people lost faith in the military. I think the spring of 2023 was like the height of faith in the military.
The hope of that counter-offensive.
Yeah, like everybody was so happy at that point. And then by the end of summer, everyone was really depressed. And this is one reason why I think that this was so stupid. But anyways, they need to get support back from people. I think people generally support the army, but not fully, because people don't fully trust the commanders. So they're trying to go through these changes in the structure, trying to make these larger units and the bigger regiments. These regiments that are kind of have celebrity leadership, like we were talking about the K2. The K2, super famous commander who's very well respected in Ukraine because he respects the lives of his soldiers so much, is what he's famous for. And everybody wants to fight for him because they feel like he's not going to throw their life away doing some, stupid attack or something. So that's what they need is you. And the fear is that all these foreigners are like constantly trying to destroy the morale of the country. It seems like the goal of the rest of the world. Everyone takes it for granted that Ukrainians are willing to fight forever when they're not. So, Trump pooping on them and the British and the Germans and the French, like everyone takes turns pooping on them, and that's what I fear is that. The words that these politicians say, that the foreign politicians mostly, are damaging the morale of the country.
Well, I don't want to try and excuse Europe, but I think the problem is because there's been this criticism from Orpo of Finland, who said that, do you know what? Friedrich Merz, he's come along and he said all the right things, being really strong, and then said, right, we're going to whack these sanctions on Russia. But then he's had to walk it back because Trump's not agreed to do the sanctions. So the understanding is that Europe can put sanctions on if they get a bit of help from the US, or Europe can send troops in if they can get some backstops from the US. But the US is just refusing to do freaking anything. And then that undermines Friedrich Merz, for example, in this case. So I think Europe would be far more able and willing and actually doing things had they got the foundational backing of the US, but they just don't have that. That is just giving everyone the shits, and it's kind of pulling apart that unity. I mean, I think there is a unity there. There's a desire there, but there's an inability to commit as much as they would like or even can, because unfortunately Trump has switched sides. That's my opinion.
Well, it comes so the thing that everyone's really afraid of is Trump pulling out air defense, like Patriot missiles in particular. So that's kind of everyone's fear, is Trump not giving Patriot missiles, because there's kind of no other option, because there's just no production. Nobody's producing. Europe is just like, we'll produce it whenever we figure it out. Like maybe 500 years from now, we'll make a missile or two. So who knows? So so you need someone to make missiles, and that's kind of like the biggest fear, is that if Trump completely pulls out, then Russia will have be able to shoot ballistic missiles wherever they want, and there's really no defense to it. So that's kind of their fear, and they're running on a fear that they're constantly walking on eggshells, and anything they say could get the Patriots withdrawn. But I feel like they could do it in a different way. They don't have to crush the Ukrainian people in order to do this. They don't have to say oh well, Ukraine has to surrender, they have to give up, we're working on a deal any day now, Ukraine will surrender any day now, don't believe us, on Tuesday Ukraine will surrender. That was the Germans and the French, and they're all shaking hands Tuesday, they'll surrender Tuesday, we promise. And the Ukrainians were like, what? We're surrendering on Tuesday? And the Europeans are like, oh, well, this was a political victory. We won that one. We're going to make them surrender on Tuesday. How was that a win? And then they take a big photograph. And then what happens on Tuesday is Putin says, I don't want to. He just says, I don't want to meet with you anymore. I don't like you. I'll only meet with you if Trump shows up. So the Europeans end up looking like a bunch of schmucks. They crush the Ukrainian people for no reason, just mock them basically, and then Putin just mocks them to their face and makes fun of them and says, "Haha, you lost again," and Trump is the victor apparently. So just things like this. It doesn't need to happen. It just does not need to happen. They don't have to do this. It's a self-inflicted wounds, and they're in wounding themselves. Like it did a lot of damage to the British and the French and the Germans, and it's just making fun of the Ukrainians at this point. Like it's just like mocking them. So I don't get it. I think they can do better. They can try to appease Trump while also not looking like idiots and not crushing or making fun of, or like, you know, it's like, oh, well, don't worry, we're going to make Ukraine surrender one of these days.
Kathy's guess. I'm not counting on Trump at all. I completely don't count on him. What I'm saying is that Europe is seeing the situation as their activity being contingent upon US support and US activity. And that's what is the problem for the Europeans. But also I can understand that because there are certain things that you need US help with. So secondary sanctions and the Treasury Department need to be helping, I think, in the most effective sanctions applications and enforcements. And that's what I'm saying. So I'm not counting on Trump. I think Trump is a complete freaking lost cause. It's a complete lost cause. I'm not counting on him at all. But it would be really freaking helpful if we did have US support. And Europe seems to use Trump as an excuse to not do what they must do. I mean, there is something in that, and you know, I think Trump isn't going to help. So you know, the argument is get on and do it themselves. So yeah. This has been the longest 15-minute wrap up to a video I've ever done, so it's a world record in that. I've just got to do a couple of thanks, and then we'll have a last kind of comment. Michael Vuchar, FA Cave in Carney, terrorists and tankies at G7. The Trumpster fire was bad enough. Off to support Zelensky and wreak havoc in Cowtown. Not quite sure what all that's about, Michael, but G7 is going to be interesting in Alberta, I believe it is, or certainly in Canada towards the end of this month. Johnny Christian, and thank you, Michael, by the way. Johnny Christensen, thank you for your Danish love there, my man. Jeff Lawler for a super sticker. Really appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you. And we have Putin Puppet, to share between Andrew and Jonathan, Slava Ukraini. I will pop Andrew a bit of map support. You can always do that through his map. He's got a link at the top to help him on, sort of buy me a coffee and whatnot, which I'm sure will be appreciated. But thank you very much, Putin Puppet. Really, really kind of you. Johnny Nedregard, it's a really generous support there, Putin Puppet. Johnny Nedregard from Norway. Who runs China and how will it affect deliveries to Russia? Better keep an eye out for serious changes depending on who grabs the power. Okay, we'll probably end it there, which is to say, Andrew, what do you make of China and North Korean support for Russia? And is China a real problem?
I think China's withdrawing from Russia, to be honest. I think it's kind of funny to watch. I think China is expecting...
What evidence do you have for that first? Sorry.
Okay, so they've cut buying coal very significantly. They've cut buying oil.
Someone was saying in the thread actually that they're getting a lot of it through Malaysia now.
Yes.
Through I can't remember, through Iran to Malaysia.
Yes, so they're now relying on Iranian oil. I know if you kind of look at like you take a zoom out, right? So like Trump wants better relations with Iran. And the Republicans want to break relations with Russia. So if you kind of like zoom out and if you're China and you're looking at this and you're saying like, it looks like Iran is swinging up and Russia's swinging down. So like maybe we should diversify into Iran. Like maybe like taking on, it was like right now it's like 50-50. They're like 50-50. Like, do we want Iran or Russia? Like 50-50, right? So they can move in either direction. They can move further into Iran, which I think they're going to, or they can move back into Russia if Iran goes wrong. And I think they're positioning themselves so that they can move in either way, so that they can, be nimble. because they're not really sure which way the administration is going to go, so they're hedging. But in the process of this hedging, they had to withdraw from Russia significantly to get here, and they could keep withdrawing and move all the way to Iran, and then that would leave Russia in a very bad position.
Happy days. So actually, you know, there's an element of good news there, perhaps.
Yeah, I think at minimum, I do not think China will oppose sanctions on Russia.
Interesting.
I think they've positioned themselves in a manner where if there are sanctions, they might not support the sanctions, but they will just say, okay, fine, whatever. They're not in a position to fight it anyway. Like their economy is in a bad spot.
Yeah, fair cop. Well, that's probably a good place to leave it. I'm going to incur the wrath of my partner, who's just been signaling to me through the window. As this quick hits and losses video has turned into a 3-hour awesome live. I absolutely love it. I love having you on, Andrew. Thank you so much for hanging out, and it's so interesting to get all of your varied opinions on stuff. And of course, everyone needs to take everything Andrew and I say with a pinch of salt. You know, we are not the be all and end all, of course, certainly speaking from my point of view, but all of these nuggets are so fascinating, and the amount of stuff that you see through geolocations and videos, you do have a really solid grasp of you know what's going on the front lines, what equipment's being used, what the new technology for drones is that we aren't seeing, but you're getting a handle on with regard to the drone footage that's coming back, and then you know the sources that you're listening to. So it's fascinating always to get your opinion on stuff. So thank you. What are your sort of final words? What to look out for?
I don't know. I think you're just gonna see more strikes about 50 kilometers out.
Right. Using
everything. Heavy bombers, other types of drones.
Final question. I don't understand. So if you go to somewhere like Pokrovsk, in the area where just to the east of Pokrovsk, where they're advancing along the T-0504, right? I don't understand why, but we've seen the Russians occasionally use like Shahed attack drones near the front line, or you know, relatively close, sometimes on the front line. Maybe Kherson, they've used it, they use them a little bit in the past, but like I don't understand why, in the absence of close air support and heavy bombers, as in actual aviation bombers, why Ukraine just doesn't blitz areas with obviously guided glide bombs from aviation, but also attack drones and larger drones. I know these are expensive. It's probably not a good use of money. Maybe that's it. But like to stop the Ukrainians by just throwing everything at the Russians, bar troops.
Did you see Ukraine's 100 kilogram drone the other day?
I don't. I think I think I reported a comment on it. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about that drone. I honestly don't even know what it is. I don't even know if it's a land-based drone or a sea-based one.
That's exactly what I was saying, because I was like, I don't know anything about this, but 100 kilograms would be really useful. Because I was saying, in fact, I remember now, Andrew, because I was saying that that's what you want to do. You want to have the ability to release those kind of munitions near the front line. And that's like 480 kilograms is what the Russians are using in, say, I don't know, Iskanda M. But if you've got a drone that can do 100 kilograms and it's probably not costing you a fifth of the Iskanda M, but actually much cheaper than that, then you've got some useful options. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that was on an island. So it makes me think it was not a ground-based, because I don't know how you'd get a ground-based thing there. So I don't know if it's a guided mortar shell. I don't know if it's a laser guided bomb. That'd be pretty cool. I don't know what it is. I genuinely don't know. So, but depending on exactly what it is, it could be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So there, watch the 100-kilogram drone space that we all pay attention to. So drones, bigger, that kind of medium range drone, the 50-kilometer drone activity is something Andrew says to watch. Some of this drone technology that's taking place, the munitions that drones are being equipped with. There is hope for the Ukrainians in innovation. This is what Zaluzhny said back when he released that piece in The Economist. That was one of his key elements of the three he was talking about. They have to innovate and they have to keep ahead of the curve. And at least at the moment, it seems like the Ukrainians are doing that. So that is something that we can all hopefully be hopeful for. Thank you, Andrew. Any last word? Last word will be yours. Okay, cool. No last words. Awesome. Last words will be mine then. Thank you to everyone in the live stream. Really appreciate your support. Thank you to all of those who so generously contributed to the to this stream. I really appreciate it. Honestly, I do. We have the new Car for Ukraine campaign that started. Please go and check that out. I don't think I've even linked it in the video below, but car4ukraine.com. Go and look at the summer campaign and then make sure you click on ATP Geopolitics and help out with that campaign to get vehicles. They're an amazing bunch of people help to get vehicles to the front line. Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate that, mate. And thanks to all the peeps in the live. JR is saying yes. Okay, sorry. JR saying something else to me in the silence. Thank you last minute to Michael Vuchar. Andrew, JP, awesome work. Continue being awesome. I'm sure that's to you, Andrew. I am only occasionally awesome. Thank you, Kathy's guest. I really appreciate that as well. Totally cool. In the meantime, take care, Toodle Pips, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.